Help! Save me! A heart-rending scream rang out, breaking the usual silence. He's coming. Screams continued to be heard on board the spacecraft, floating smoothly in space. We're all going to die. What's the deal? Close the door quickly. Stay away. One of the hatches of the ship was covered with cracks, bloody prints and smudges. Only dark silhouettes rested on the surface, leaving traces and twisting before disappearing into the depths of the ship. To help. There was another scream from one of the silhouettes. Ka. There was a cough, and palms covered with scarlet blood began to slide along the surface of one of the windows and leave streaks with prints. Ka. Ka. At least someone help me. The victims of a non-existent savior begged. The dark gray bubbling substance seemed to be spreading along the perimeter of the ship, with the tentacles of a sea monster becoming covered with large bubbles. Clusters of large bubbles secreted mucus, which fell in large drops to the floor. Vibrations echoed through the corridors of the shrouded something, and now and then brewing bubbles burst, releasing a black liquid. Another bubble released the liquid again, forming a hole in its surface. But the bubble was not allowed to exist anymore, and someone stepped on it with gusto, trampling the bubble into a dense muck. The muddy surface of the helmet screen immediately reflected the widespread streams of substance covering the walls and ceiling of the corridor. Report to all units on board. An order rang out in the speaker. We're going to the captain's cabin. A group of people with machine guns overweight followed in an even formation from the door deep into the ship. I repeat. All divisions. The commander's voice was heard again from a small screen located on the sleeve of the suit. A small screen of a light blue shade with dancing lines seemed to have descended from an ECG report. This is the captain. One of the fighters spoke. Should we go too? Asked his ally, following on his heels. You must ignore these instructions if you want to save others. One of the fighters spoke. We are moving forward according to the schedule. We have to save as many human lives as possible. Exclaimed the fighter, on whose back the numbers 01 were printed. This is an order. He commanded. Yes, that's right. There were shouts of agreement on the squad. Making his way through the shattered corridor with bloody splashes on the walls, the fighter stopped, listening to some indistinct sounds somewhere in the distance. There. Is anyone there? Fighter 01 heard the question, carefully moving further step by step. Help. I beg. There was a plaintive call, and the group of people in suits continued to move further and further. Ka. The fighter slowly advanced, but soon leaned against a wall and decided to look from the shelter to where the voice was coming from. What? For? The stunned soldier exclaimed as his eyes widened in shock. A terrible picture appeared before him. In a room also dotted with gray tentacles, on which bubbles, in the middle lay two large mountains of corpses piled on top of each other, and their faces were distorted by the emotion of horror. How so? One of the fighters muttered, amazed at the picture he saw. Hey. Keep yourself in hand. I decided to support his ally right there, so that the team would not lose morale. We do not lose vigilance. Fighter 01 spoke while his allies scattered a little to assess the terrain. Quickly look for survivors. There. Is anyone there? The voice that the team commander was looking for rang out again, to which he immediately turned around. Get me out. From here. The voice came from under someone's corpse. You won't even notice it right away. Be patient a little. The fighter exclaimed and immediately rushed to help. We are now. But what was his surprise as soon as he saw the victim of the incident? He paused, eyes wide and not daring to blink. To me. It really hurts. Help. Someone lifted the corpses, and a huge head looked out more like a stranger. Two glowing eyes, two rows of sharp teeth, with purple drops of mucus dripping from them. Monster. Stuttering, one of the soldiers of the squad shouted, which immediately surprised the others. But the man did not have time to say anything more when suddenly a clawed paw with 4 fingers grabbed his head like a toy and pulled him towards himself. The other two who were standing nearby were immediately taken aback when they saw the monster that got out. Ka. Ka. Only the captured fighter issued them. In front of them, a monster was sitting on a mountain of bodies, holding their partner with a distended belly. The monster is a dark gray shade, with 3 pairs of clawed hands, 2 long like a spider, and 1 pair of small ones, as if he is to some extent a descendant of a Tyrannosaurus rex, with a long ribbed tail at the end of which there was either a claw or a sting. His head was also a match for the body, rather big, with an elongation on the head like a squid triangle. Predator. Small white eyes with a black narrow elongated pupil. 2 rows of sharp teeth, like a piranha, covered with brown blood. The enemy is on the horizon. Fire. Exclamations of fighters were heard, and laser discharges of bright green color immediately flew from their weapons. But it was not there. The monster was much quicker and masterfully dodged the barrage of fire. The monster, like lightning, quickly slipped between the shots and was getting closer to them every second. He scratched his skin to the brush, which formed 4 scratches of a bright green color. One wave of the paw, and now a green liquid in an amount of considerable size, flew out of the scratches towards the soldiers. The soldiers did not have time to react, they were only surprised by what suddenly began to fly in their direction. Acidic blood. One of the soldiers exclaimed. The monster's blood was indeed like acid. The green goo got on the hand of one of the fighters and immediately began to burn through his suit, and steam rose into the air. God! The second one exclaimed. It hit him on the helmet, having eaten it up to his face, and on his hand, from which only a set of snow-white knuckles remained instead of a brush, even without any traces of blood. Calmly. One of the fighters who had just run into the thick of things exclaimed. Inject the medicine immediately. Suddenly, a green beam of a shot immediately flew in his direction. Ah! He was immediately thrown to the ground, only breathing and screams echoed on the ship. Ah! Ah! When the emergency care is completed, go to the medical office. A voice sounded in the speaker. Ugh. The helmet was half smashed. It was impossible to open my eyes. And blood was flowing from his temple in thin streams. He could only see how the monster held the human body of one of the allies with 3 pairs of paws and 8, starting from the head. The body of another lay right in front of his eyes. A head with an open mouth, in which many teeth are no longer in place, one eye is so bulging that it looks like it will fall out, the other eyeball has already fallen out, and lies next to the closed eye socket, connecting with it only with a thin rope of vessels. God! The man who regained consciousness and saw this picture exclaimed. Damn it! That thing! Thought another, lying not so far away. The same fighter with the numbers 01 on his uniform. His helmet was also broken and only fragments were sticking out, and in his hands, he was holding a kind of black ball with glowing blue markings. He wanted to use it on the monster. When suddenly a monster grabbed the fighter's hand with its paw, from which the man dropped the object. With the other limb from the row of shorter legs, the monster waved his index finger from side to side, making it clear that it was better not to do this. SHHH. The monster made a sound. Some kind of light pink substance appeared on his shoulder, from which many tentacles went up. The substance suddenly flopped to the floor and crawled towards the soldier with a half-broken helmet. The tentacle merged with the entire substance, and it acquired larger dimensions, advancing on one of the soldiers. What? He exclaimed immediately. A medium-sized pink ball with an elongated mini-tentacle, as if sucking in a man's face. And one of the monster's paws held the soldier by his left arm, pinning him firmly to the floor. Second. And now the monster began to press the man's legs to the floor with its paws, ignoring his twitching. After a while, the clot regained its small size and jumped towards the monster. He jumped back on his shoulder, waving from side to side with his tail appendage. Jaiya. The substance made a sound. SHH. The monster issued his question, to which the pink onion with a tail responded with a kind of love stained with blood. The monster was moving further away from what had happened, and in place of the man's head, lay a completely gnawed snow-white skull with scarlet splashes of blood on the surface. It only sent streams of white steam into the air, and the remnants of pink liquid dripped onto the floor. Suddenly the monster stopped, surprised by what he saw. There was a door in front of him, but it was completely closed. This puzzled him, because he had to follow on. Without thinking twice, he leaned one of the hands torn from the corpses against a palm scanner, thereby opening the passage. Unregistered user. Only the ship's system was minted, which surprised the monster. SH. He said, puzzled, still holding the bloody human limb. SHH? He drew attention to the substance. The pink onion was sitting on his shoulder as if nothing had ever happened, but at the same time it was holding that black ball with blue markings, which one of the soldiers held until the moment of death. Ship. A monster with a protruding spine along the length of its back appeared through the clouds of smoke. He was moving towards 2 workers who were shouting loudly in one voice. Aya. The monster's hind legs are clawed and similar in shape to the fold of a dog or cat's paws, but without fur, and there were only 3 fingers. The man shed tears and screamed loudly in fear at the sight of this terrible monster. The monster opened its mouth, baring its teeth, and immediately a clawed paw reached out towards one of the men. I devour all hostile alien creatures. The monster's mouth was open right next to the brunette's head. Trickles of purple goo trickled down the sharp teeth, stretching between the jaws. One of the monster's paws held the man's head, pressing the eyeball deeper into the victim's eye socket with a finger. The other paw held the man by the throat, squeezing his vise harder and harder. The creature's tail wrapped around its victim, thereby depriving it of movement. And they grow indefinitely. In the middle of the vast cosmos, in the cargo hold of a ship made of cold metal, I had no choice but to admit that I had become a hostile alien creature in a sci-fi survival game. Space Survival. This is an RPG game in which one of the various races existing in the vast cosmos is chosen to survive, explore and develop. Sometimes I became a metal gremlin. Alien creatures with metal scales on their backs, from under which clawed paws are visible. It's like sucker tentacles on the head. And sometimes he was a mutating monster. A monster with a marsh-colored skin. Clawed paws with 4 fingers. A mouth with razor-sharp 2 rows of teeth. A little higher on the thin branches of the skin, 1 canine. Yellow round eyes from large to small, so 2 rows consisting of 3 pairs. Destroyed enemies in ground battles, he held a leadership position in the group for collective battles. Glazed skyscrapers. Explosions happen here and there. Alien blue-tinged creatures with large yellow eyes, more like beetle varieties in shape, are flying up to the sky. And even attack the planet. I played for all the cosmic creatures that seemed to come out of nightmares, but there was one species that I was most attached to. The room is plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the bright light of computer monitors. On one of them, the human body, brain and brief information are displayed. On the monitor in front of the guy on a black background with green signs, an image of a monster is displayed. It looked like a large beetle, but with a long ribbed tail, which has a tip at the end. 6 pairs of clawed paws, one of which is shorter and smaller. Behind the back are wings that fold under strong protection, like a beetle. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter. Abbreviated NVKM. I called him Amorphous. He is created in the image and likeness of the creature from the movie Alien. This is a species that endlessly enhances itself with the genetic information of the victims. At first glance, it looked like a scam, but because of the incredible difficulty of survival, the impossibility of dialogue and cooperation with others, it was the worst non-mainstream race in the game. A crowd of people in uniform with machine guns. On the floor lie the remains of a monster shattered by shots. The reason why such a trash race became my favorite was quite simple. This is a species that can freely evolve and become stronger, depending on its choice and will. That's what bribed me. Suddenly, a bright blue window of the system appeared, blinding with unaccustomed. The informational text read. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Baby. Goal. To survive. Special skills. Hypersensitivity. I kept my eyes on the system screen, reading the text. There are claws on my hands. Small ones like that. Clack. Clack. That's how I look now. I thought and sighed heavily, sprawling on the floor. A cub with a bald big head and a scorpion body. The head probably looks more like some kind of fish. And I also have a kind of beard. I like aliens so much. It flashed through my head, and I immediately remembered the monster from the movie, scratching my head. There is no sense in these thoughts. I thought again, looking around. I abruptly turned on my back and, making a loud sound, began to fidget. Ah, it itches. I didn't know that skin peeling is accompanied by itching. I sighed heavily, tired of trying to scratch myself. I am surrounded only by the skin I have shed. More precisely, her scraps. First we need to get food. I'm hungry as hell. I began to think, heading forward. It seems to be a spacious place. But some part of the area is occupied by boxes fixed with striped tape, large metal boxes that are used for large batches or transportation of livestock. By the way, in form it looks like a megacorporation or a star union. I immediately thought, studying and analyzing this area. If they catch me now, they'll kill me right away. Supersensitivity. I lifted the mustache located on my chin, and a light turquoise pulse went from it in different directions. This gave me the ability to scan with my eyes everything that is in these boxes and containers. Oh, there are cardboard boxes of the Black Mice Corporation, and in the other there are barrels covered with some rags. Oh, I found it. I immediately quickly got my bearings, found the object I was looking for and hurried to it. What I need is to be in a dark green container with a panel of numbers. It's good that it's a password. I thought, approaching the panel with my mustache. Let's take a look. And turquoise waves of impulses immediately started coming from me again. 1 2 3 4, really? I was immediately surprised by such an easy PIN code. The level of security in space is simply off the scale. I entered such an easy code, and with the steam escaping after vacuuming, the lid opened. In front of me are rows of bars in beautiful wrappers. That's what an empty stomach needs. Carefully tearing the golden wrapper with small claws, I fished out a chocolate yummy. And she immediately went into my mouth. It looks like I'm chewing on a rubber eraser, but I managed to feed myself somehow. Thoughts flashed through my head. Yes, the taste of this dessert seemed to me in a different light, but it gave me the green light. Suddenly a cockroach wanted to sneak past me at high speed. I immediately reacted to it. More precisely, my tail reacted and the sting at the end immediately pierced his abdomen. I didn't run for long. A cockroach? I was still somewhat surprised by my catch, but the body moved mechanically, there was nothing to be done. Maybe this will do for food? Delicious? I thought, immediately starting to chew the poor guy. Suddenly, the already forgotten window of the light blue system appeared in front of me. The predator effect is activated. Wings. Successful acquisition of genetic data. The abduction of wings among the biological properties of cockroach. Apply wings? The inscription read. Under it there are two possible answers, yes and no. Oh. I was lucky that I got a valuable gene so quickly. Gene abundance is a key element of Amorpha's work. The more he gets genetic information, the stronger he becomes in return. He is subject to evolve into stronger beings. Wings. Not bad. I began to think, delving into the text on the information screen of the system. I immediately poked the yes button with my claw. Well, what's there to think about? What I agreed to immediately began to grow on my back. At first it was just growths. But after a while, thin wings formed under the protection of a solid layer. Good. But the wings of a small size on the back of a scorpion looks strange, but if they give, then take it. Really, how to move them? The way they're on my back, it turns out I should feel like I'm moving a trapezius muscle? I thought about the problem that came right there. Hey, it's still harder than it seems. Let's try. I finally made up my mind and walked closer to the edge of the box. Max. Max. I waved my novelty, and my body immediately soared a short distance into the air. However, it still looks strange. It won't do. The weight is too much for this size of wings. I started to quickly devour the bars one by one, ignoring their strange taste. They burn more calories than I thought. It flashed right through my head. Suddenly I heard rustling and immediately looked out, looking at the floor. Cockroaches were running very fast on the floor. So to speak, in packs. In order to use the wings correctly, you need to have the necessary abilities. It flashed through my mind while I was eating another bar, watching the animals. The first goal has been set. Once, the sting pierces the cockroach's body. Crunch. 2, it goes right into my mouth. A clear liquid flows down from the sting my drool after I remove the cockroach from the sting. This is my 20th. I thought right there, counting my victims. Is it really to no avail again? It tastes like a doll. I was thinking, eating another one. As suddenly in the air, the light blue system window appeared again. The text in it read race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Cub purpose. To survive special skills. Hypersensitivity, wings, chitinous shell. Chitinous shell. Protection increases with increasing level. I thought, studying the new information. Protection increases with increasing level. This is a good ability. I need to provide strong survivability characteristics, but it's not as easy as it seems. Scratching my head, I thought, and immediately sighed dejectedly. Survivability is a characteristic that slows down aging by reducing energy consumption. This is especially true for passive insects and plants. Characteristics significantly reduce the need to cling to food. The bottom line is that if I want to survive, then I have to catch more cockroaches. I immediately began to quickly look around, looking for my victims from different angles. Let's try to change tactics. I climbed up on one of the boxes again, so that the cockroaches could be seen better and so that they would not be wary of me. Why not try to fly again after so many sacrifices? I decided to try to jump between the boxes and try to stay in the air at least a little. But I didn't have to wait long, and it's better to see my potential victims. And this is the majesty of Amorpha? I asked myself a question. No sooner had the cockroaches reacted than I immediately rushed to them, as if hungry. Although we all know perfectly well what I need them for. I immediately grab one of them with my small claws. Crunch. Without missing a moment, I immediately start eating it, starting with the juiciest places. Well, no. I immediately noticed one of my victims running away while I was busy with the first one. This is not good, we should hurry. You won't leave. I immediately took off and rushed for the next course of my lunch. Wait, you won't leave. Ugh. No luck. This nimble bastard immediately disappeared into one of the cracks, and I hit hard. It seems to be about one of the containers. My dinner lurked between two containers. Ha. You can't hide from me. I immediately launched my tail in his direction. Fortunately, I have a long and thin one. It is easy to examine bottlenecks. Crack. I deftly pierced him through with my sting, and the dark green liquid immediately splashed onto the floor. Chic. Chic. He was still trying to dig in, but I don't care. Now he is in my power and I can eat him calmly. Only an unnecessary pair of thin paws fell to the floor. All that's left of the poor guy. Predator's reaction. A voice exclaimed, which surprised me greatly with its suddenness. A system window popped up in front of me again with another informational text to tread. Successful acquisition of the survivability gene. Abduction survivability among the biological properties of cockroach. Apply survivability? And the answer options are yes and no. Of course, apply. Immediately I mentally exclaimed and, without thinking, at the moment pressed the yes key with my claw. My chitin has become stronger, and my paws are more muscular. The tail has also become much stronger. Awesome. I exclaimed mentally, rejoicing at the renewal of the body. But it can't be that smooth. It would be necessary to think about something important. The owners of this ship, the people, are my enemies. The vibrations that I feel behind the wall, the barely perceptible noise of footsteps, suggest that there is little time left. In order to avoid the gloomy future that will soon come, it is necessary to pass the cub stage as soon as possible, and for this to expand the scope of activity beyond the cargo compartment. This is just a beginning. I thought, looking around, so to speak, my possessions. It's time to break through that cargo hold where I took my first steps. Where do I go after the cargo hold? I already knew the answer to this question. Slowly moving my legs, I moved along the ceiling. I'm going to the cold room next to the reactor. A thought flashed through my mind. This is an important object, so there will be few visitors. So to speak, I'm hiding under a dark lamp. If it doesn't work out, then you can break the reactor together with the refrigerator and run away. I was still thinking, unscrewing the bolts that held the grate. Soon I was finally able to get into the ventilation. To be honest, they have a pretty spacious one. Let's go. My thoughts flashed. When suddenly there was a strange sound. A huge valve was spinning in front of me in this spacious ventilation. It's so powerful that it wouldn't let me move on. Scary. I was taken aback before such a pressure of air that is ready to take you down. Carefully getting closer, I decided to twist the grill of this fan. A couple of 3 movements and the grill flew away with a clang, obeying the currents of air. If the fan is damaged, people will immediately receive a message, so there is no other choice but to pass, avoiding the blades at the right moment. It's time to rely on Amorpha's abilities. I started the pulse from the mustache again. Iron oxide mixed with air and fine metal powder. I began to reason, analyzing the situation. Rotating blades wear out at a certain point in time and slow down a little. My brain, which has analyzed all the information, suggests that it's time to do it right now. I immediately sent a nervous impulse into my wings and jerked towards the object I needed. All or nothing. I immediately thought sharply. I covered my head with my front paws and rushed to the big fan with just one idea. Slip through. I didn't have a second, but it's better than nothing. The valve just barely grazed my sting at the end of the tail. And I immediately flew away from the valve by the force of energy. Alive. I'm alive. Mentally I rejoiced, sweating with excitement. So, let's see what happens next. I didn't waste any time and immediately continued my long journey. Oh, there's a spider here. After a while, I went to one of the grills of the ventilation passages, hearing some noise. Hey, what about the result of experiment 26? It sounded clearer as soon as I got even closer. Failed. Another voice answered. TC, the head will be furious again. You're a newbie. There's nothing we can do about it because things aren't going smoothly with the boss. One of the men with short blonde hair and dark gray eyes spoke. PFFT, let's get this over with. The second one with a longer shock of hair and blue eyes answered him. An experimental laboratory? I was immediately puzzled over what I heard. Isn't this an ordinary ship? I think they are also supporters of the megacorporation. A megacorporation is a group of people who thrive throughout the solar system. In short, based on the motives of earthly people. Instead of a government, large corporations dominate the country, most of whose members are materialists. Against a background of brightly illuminated high-rise buildings, two figures with their hair fluttering in the wind. Two girls, a brunette and a blonde. Two images. Although many races in the game are neutral, but among them the megacorporation is close to evil. This is the only place where a normal person is turned into a slave. I immediately began to try to unscrew the next screws in order to remove the mesh and get into this room. When this happens in games, reality appears in terrible colors. As soon as the grill was removed, one of the barriers, I immediately flew into this room and sank to the floor. We need to take a look at what we have today. Looking around, I thought. I'll change my course depending on what kind of research ship it is. I immediately started up an impulse with my mustache again in order to study and analyze the terrain. A mutant soldier specializing in ground combat, the Hulk Mutant Research Center. A monster with a green-tinged skin, under which the muscles move in motion. On his head is a metal mask that does not close his eyes just now. Will give me a strong body and fighting abilities. Where they experiment with the superpowers of the cult of the space elf, a girl with outstretched arms, from which lightning emanates around the perimeter. Plum-colored skin, blue eyes without a pupil at all. Horns, rounded upwards, stick out on the head from different sides. And in the middle of the forehead there is a third eye. You can get a powerful psychedelic gift. Personally, I would like to be on the side of the cult, but it's too much to get psychedelic power from the very beginning. I wondered. TM help. Suddenly there was a voice from outside. Help? I was immediately puzzled. Someone needs help? I crawled in the direction from where I think this very voice was heard. And immediately looked out from around the corner. Pain. The voice rang out again. In a tall flask with some substance there was something of a round shape of a light pink shade. Wires were attached to it, and its kind of antenna lay listlessly without movement. Help. The creature spoke again. Bubble amoeba. I thought, examining this something. Its feature is the preservation of oxygen. Skip the topic of food. This is the most useless skill for an amorphous. It suddenly dawned on me. Shall we look for a hint with hypersensitivity? I immediately sent a pulse around the room for the analysis I needed. Electricity? The spherical substance began to emit small lightning currents, which surprised me very much. The researchers talked about this. Ah, here it is. Judging by the hypersensitivity, if you click on this, the experiment will end. I reasoned and immediately pressed one of the keys that my gut told me. On the dark screen, the light strip responsible for the impulses from the creature immediately began to decline, and the pink creature said, "Gratitude. Now you can live as you want." I said to myself. Suddenly there were footsteps, and I immediately felt the danger. Is someone coming? I immediately tried to retreat from there, to fly away as quickly as possible. I sat down on one of the shelves with some experimental subjects also in cylindrical jars. Alas, the wings carried me only to this point, so to speak. Suddenly the door slid aside with a rustle. And there was a click of heels. When will the 26th experiment be able to give results? The first one who entered the room asked. She was a woman with pale, almost ash-gray skin and coal-colored hair cut into a square. In her hand sits a black cat and enjoys the caress from her mistress. A man crawls on her heels. Most likely, this is one of those who spoke in this room before. He holds a white tablet and sweats from fright. Well, or she's a sick important person that he's so afraid of her. There is progress at the moment, he mumbled, but it needs a little more time. Time is money. The woman snorted, turning sharply in his direction. I need to report the results to the company before I arrive at my destination. If you are unable to achieve the desired result, the company may reconsider the fact of your work and location here. The man was taken aback by this abrupt action and almost threw the bottles off the shelves. Looking back, he clenched his teeth harder from fright. Behind him on a shelf in a glass flask floated a skull with sprouted hair from the inside. KHK? Please don't. The employee screamed, and the boss's gaze only coldly slid aside. Senior researcher, Mr. Adiway. She spoke calmly as she walked forward. The man followed her only with his eyes, sweating more and shaking, as if a horde of insects were crawling over his body. Why yes? Of course, I don't want such results either. She said, walking up to the main cylinder with a pink ball of substance. I am also looking forward to them from a senior researcher. If you can achieve this compliance with Experiment 26, then the position of Chief Scientific Officer will no longer be such an illusory dream. She did not take her eyes off the experiment while her furry pet was peacefully licking himself on her hands. "Q, are you sure?" the employee immediately exclaimed. "Yes. At least, the chief researcher, if everything goes well this time. Maybe we can cooperate with Mars," she said. "They are very interested in this project." But in response to her speech, silence and the man's frowning eyebrows followed. "K. How about going to Ionium?" Finally, a senior employee has become emboldened. "Ionium?" The girl was taken aback when she heard this and thought about it. An awakening drug produced by the Star Union," she muttered, stroking her cat. "This is a drug that we have never tried. There are a few more." The man started, but the boss interrupted him. "I went through all the possible ingredients." Looking at the creature behind the glass and not taking her eyes off, she continued. "All that's left is Ionium." "Good." She agreed all the same. "Act right now." "What?" "Yeah." The man was immediately taken aback, covered with a new perspiration from excitement. If he doesn't assimilate the neutralizer, it will interfere with the life support system. This is a situation where the results of the study should already be known. The woman spoke. "True, but..." The employee wanted to say something, but the boss interrupted him again. "I think you should understand the seriousness. I watched all this, hiding behind their experiments in bottles. And it seems to me quite successfully. Yes. I'll do everything." The man mumbled, and his fingers ran over the keys of the keyboard. "First I'll give him 0.100 milligrams. 0.300 milligrams." The spherical substance immediately began to shake from the impulses that were let through it. 0.500 milligrams. There was a reaction. "Now 0.700 milligrams," said the man, and the ball went in waves right there. "Wait. If there is a reaction, you can increase it even more. Enter everything you have," the woman said, quite chuckling at the result. "What?" The employee was immediately taken aback. "It's not much." He immediately began to mumble. "Get out of the way." She immediately pushed him away and without hesitation pressed one of the keys. Of the three greens, one turned yellow under her pressure. And along the thin tubes that are attached to the substance from different sides, some small particles immediately rushed, as if illuminated with violet light. Enough. The creature was screaming, which was being violently electrocuted. Painfully. But his voice was heard only by me, but not by these crazy scientists. "Help!" the creature exclaimed again. "Help!" While the creature was suffering and crying out for salvation, the head of this laboratory looked with pleasure at all this and smiled quite broadly. "Pain. You are welcome." I felt terribly sorry for him, but how can I help him? Painfully. "Help." And soon the creature fell silent. The woman chuckled, considering the result of the experiment. An interesting result. We need more interaction with Experiment 26. In front of her, the same creature was floating in the flask, but no longer an elastic pink ball, but a twisted one. He has more tentacles and they are all different sizes and uneven. "Are you okay?" the employee mumbled. "Yes, let me know if there are significant results," the girl said, walking to the exit door and still stroking the cat. "Sure." The employee only mumbled in response and bowed. Suddenly the woman noticed something out of the corner of her eye. She turned around abruptly and looked at the place where I had been sitting before. Phew, a little more and maybe she would have noticed me. Who knows what would have been waiting for me then. Not seeing anything that interested her, she chuckled and went on to the exit. Just as she turned in my direction. Thoughts flashed through my head and sweat broke out on my face. It's a shame. I don't like all this. Clacking my teeth, I summed up what I saw. It's decided. The clatter of heels on the iron floor receded down the corridor with every second. You'll be dead in a few days. It was either some kind of laboratory or a starting point. Thousands of tubes connected the devices and lined the walls, ceiling, and even in some places on the floor. In the middle of the room there is a hole of considerable size. Tubes also descended into it in a circle. I decided to try something and tried to collect saliva in my mouth. A jet of green liquid immediately shot into the wall. So, let's go. I decided, having thought out a plan of action for the near future. I probed the area with the help of an impulse, which I immediately sent from my mustache. Every part of the ship feels like one with my body. I began to analyze the data, focusing on the impulse. Whoever owns the information owns the world, that's what I need to win the war. I made myself a sleeping place out of saliva. My identification marks are also hung here and there throughout the pipes. Find out where and what the enemies are doing. Where to go. All information, including negotiations, is delivered to me through liquid through all channels. On the fourth day of amorphous life, my nest was ready. Having built a nest, I walked back and forth between the nest and the cargo hold for several days, catching and eating cockroaches with spiders, while having time to peek and collect information. It comes at the same time. I thought, watching through the ventilation grate. Her name is Eugene Kisaragi. He is the head of the research team on this ship. A tall girl in a white suit, wearing a blue turtleneck. There are armed soldiers on both sides of her. Although she is weak in body, she is the most important figure on this ship. And poses an immediate danger to me. There was a case when one of the test subjects managed to escape. 4 columns in a row, but alas, one of the glass columns is broken and empty. While other researchers were confused, she managed to catch the experiment. A large creature as tall as a man. There are a lot of appendages on the head with mini claws at the tips. On the chin there are 2 ossified whiskers also with small claws at the ends. By creating a special tracking device for 2 hours. It's so strange, but at the same time so good for a person. I wondered. Does she have the makings of psychedelic power? This is a unique skill inherent in all races. A power similar to superpowers such as psychokinesis, telepathy, and mental control. However, it is very rare among mankind to meet an individual born with psychedelic potential. Regardless of her talent, this is a situation where armed soldiers are always right. I reasoned, already being in my cradle and eating bars one by one. How to get there? Suddenly a system window appeared in front of me. It's been a while since he's been seen. The text on it read. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Baby goal. To survive special skills. Hypersensitivity, wings, chitinous shell, survivability, paralyzing sting, new, a paralyzing sting. I repeated mentally, studying all the information. This is the perfect skill for a weak me. I kept thinking as I devoured the bars one by one. With this, you can easily defeat at least one adult. A large drop suddenly formed on the sting and fell to the tip of the sting. The duration of the poison is 5 minutes, but this is quite enough. In any case, I have to create a 1-to-1 situation to use the sting, but it's not easy because the soldiers are always in sight. I was upset by this thought alone, continuing my meal. I don't think I'll get an answer if I just think about it. And if there is a chance? With 2 bars in my claws and a third in my mouth, I hurried about my business. Well, maybe, I can't miss a chance. I went back to the room where experiment 26, as they called it, is located and looked around the corner. Joy. Said the substance, a voice that only I can hear. I crawled closer to the flask and paid attention to him. You seem much better than yesterday. I brought food again. I said it, so to speak, and handed him 2 bars. Meal. His voice rang out immediately. I crumbled the candy bar into the equipment compartment. And small particles immediately began to ply through the tubes connected to the pink ball. Delicious. The creature uttered and immediately seemed to glow with happiness. Bubble Amoeba has no special abilities in the game. I began to think, watching this process. She is the only one who is different, having the simple features of another race. Oh, come to think of it, she raised her cat. Suddenly it dawned on me. And if you think about it, she has a great affection for him. I immediately remembered with what love she stroked her pet. If the cat dies, won't there be a loophole? In addition, he is not guarded like Kisaragi, and he is alone in the room, except when the hostess calls him. It's decided. I'll try to catch the cat on the bait. A soft black lump, waving its tail and yawned sweetly after his lunch nap. Meow. The cat stretched out, arching. His name is Caesar, right? I began to think, watching my current goal. Just like that emperor. I was sitting in another branch of the ventilation, and my research target was tumbling on the blue bedspread of her mistress. How can I not gain weight because I only eat meat every day? I pondered, not taking my eyes off. Looking at this one, Eugene Kisaragi is definitely an unusual person. It seems that killing the cat will be easy because it looks stupid. I immediately launched an impulse to explore the area so that I would then be left alone thinking about all sorts of unexpected turns. But definitely not here. At the entrance to this ventilation, everything looks fine, but if you look at it with hypersensitivity, you will notice that it is completely covered with a laser grid. Even a slight touch will trigger an alarm. An ambush. I snorted, getting angry and nervously tapping my tail on the metal floor of the ventilation. The cat immediately heard me and raised his ears up, listening to the noise. Meow. The cat exclaimed and immediately looked in my direction. He rushed like lightning towards the bars, baring his fangs and glaring angrily. What about you? I cursed mentally. The cat immediately rested his paws on the grate, from which he dissatisfied jingled under pressure. What's there? The guards immediately became alert. Where are these sounds coming from? Bam. Bam. It was heard from the ventilation side. The cat restlessly drummed his paws on the grate, trying to climb inside and get something. Rather me. The cat. One of the fighters said discontentedly and grabbed his head. Again? The second guard asked with displeasure. Although it was more of a rhetorical question. God for what? The guards were indignant while I was leaning back trying not to move and was covered with perspiration from fright that they would find me now. I can't believe I made such a mistake. With a sigh of relief, I thought. Attracted attention with his tail. Wait a minute. Suddenly, a thought struck me like an electric shock. The bored cat, provocation, reaction. I was visited by very interesting thoughts. Still, this is not a random twist of fate because it led to a good idea. The plan is ripe. Hee hee. The cat lay back on the bed and began to spin from side to side, playing with his restless tail. Suddenly he caught the sound again and immediately became alert, pricking up his ears on top of his head again. He immediately lifted his head and looked at the ventilation, where the extra sounds were coming from. The cat came closer and saw the slightly twitching corpse of a cockroach behind the bars. The cat was immediately interested in this, and a gleam of interest in this victim appeared in his eyes. The cat touched the bars with his paw, to which he even opened without pressure, falling to the floor. The cat, without thinking twice, immediately jumped into the place that interested him so much. Link, link. Only sounds were heard from the body of the cat on the grate. Ringing again? One of the guards asked. It's a cat. The second one answered. Annoying, let's get out of here. Where is he going? The voice of one of the guards rang out again, while the cat was playing with the cockroach's corpse with interest. We have to protect him. The second one grunted. The cat moved slowly and surely through the ventilation, following from one cockroach corpse to another. Maya? Asked the cat at the void, looking out from behind the turn of the ventilation. Further on, a number of corpses continued to lie in the branch. The cat became even more interested in such a game and continued his journey with even more mischief, which colored his gray everyday life. Maya! He exclaimed at the end of the journey. The cat went out into the cargo area, a new location for him. The cat found another shriveled cockroach with a broken body. He reached for it, meow. Without even noticing me. But I didn't waste a second and immediately rushed at my victim. My sting did not completely sink into the carcass of the animal, but I was still able to let in a paralyzing green liquid. Ryer? The animal exclaimed from the palpable pain and uncertainty. Ka. While the victim was convulsing, I hovered over the calf. Ka. Ka. KH. The animal's eyes almost popped out of their sockets and vomit came out of his mouth. The victim didn't like my new ability. I opened my mouth, aiming at my victim. What? It's crazy. I butchered the carcass, plunging my sharp teeth into it and tearing it apart. Divine taste. I admired mentally, greedily eating as if I hadn't eaten for months. From the corridor came the sound of heels, approaching with every second. Another second and the main leader with disheveled hair, the color of resin, flew out of the corridor. The employees were stunned by her appearance and her condition, so much so that they jumped aside in fear. A woman with a confident gait was quickly heading towards a man in uniform who was sitting at a computer and tracking something. She was not alone, but with a guard of 2 men in uniform and with weapons at the ready. Hello, Captain. She turned to a blue-eyed bald man in a black jacket. When will I see Caesar? The enraged woman exclaimed as her lips curled in displeasure. The soldiers are looking for him, the man said, a little patience. It's been 2 hours. She exclaimed, raising her voice, and slammed on the table. She was unhappy with what had happened. He observes the eating regime. She was terrible in anger, like a witch from some swamp. Most likely something happened. She shouted again in displeasure. Dear, the head of the research group, after a pause, addressed the captain calmly. I repeat, we are on a ship. If the cat didn't fly away on the rescue ship and didn't escape, he must be here somewhere. That's why I'm telling you to find him right now. The woman screamed again at the captain's words. She was only angrier at his calmness. I mean, if you wait, everything will come to its senses. Only the captain continued to speak in the same calm tone, and he only mentally asked himself a question. Who is this cat? Damn. If it wasn't for noble capital, the captain was still thinking, gritting his teeth with displeasure. I would put her in solitary confinement right now. What about the guards? The woman exclaimed again, leaning slightly towards him and not lowering her tone. All of them are in custody. The man calmly rapped out. Preventive measures will be taken. But before he could finish, she immediately interrupted him. Execute them now. And? The captain was immediately taken aback by such sharp desires. Your captain's authority allows you to command immediately, right? Power has power. The woman hissed, incinerating him with her evil gaze. Anyway, it's too much. The man spoke, sweating. If they are executed, the other soldiers will be outraged. And what? The woman screamed again, clenching her teeth in anger and moving closer to the captain. After. Progress in the search. The captain mumbled. Does it make sense to talk about punishment? All the employees were surprised and even, so to speak, stunned by what was happening. It doesn't mean anything. Captain, the woman immediately turned in a calmer manner, but anger was felt in every word. I think you forgot something. This all happened because the soldiers were not working properly. These words had already angered the soldiers, and they immediately had muscles on their cheekbones. Yeah. The captain began to mumble again, looking down. Me too, sorry. We are fully aware of this. I will take this opportunity to discipline the soldiers. The woman did not take her eyes off him, still breathing fast with rage. The veins on her face were even slightly swollen. She didn't say anything, just sighed heavily and closed her eyes. She was not satisfied with this whole situation, and even more so with inaction. I know. She threw it and immediately turned her back on him. I'll be back in 2 hours. But if nothing works out by then, she said with the same anger, only for a moment turning in the direction of the captain. You'd better leave the position of captain. She left the room, leaving an unflattering residue and spoiling the whole mood. Damn. The captain exclaimed and slammed his fist on the table. Where can he be? The captain asked aloud, not even addressing anyone properly. Where is it? Grinning, I thought, having observed this picture. Already in my stomach. By the way, I was thinking and the window of the system immediately popped up in front of me, this skill wild instinct. What kind of heresy? I exclaimed mentally, watching the letters jump in the field. The system of merging skills. This is a system that combines skills into one. And strengthens them. I used them so often that I memorized all the combinations in the game. I was speechless when I saw the notification text box when I was eating the cat. The text in the system window read, abduction is a wild instinct among the biological properties of the cat. Apply wild instinct? Yes, no, I'm an expert on games, but I've never seen anything like this before. Light blue system window with a small number of lines. The wild instinct skill has been applied. Convergence with the existing hypersensitivity skill is possible immediately. A new system window appeared with a text of different content. A fusion of wild instinct and hypersensitivity. A new skill Predator's Sense has been obtained. Predator's Instinct? Improved skill. Based on the existing skill, you can detect threats in advance. I tried to activate it because it was said that it detects danger. The super-sensible ability was much stronger than before, but the expected effect of predicting the future was not activated. Most likely, this is a passive option that is used automatically. As long as there is no threat, it does not work. I was thinking, moving at a fast pace forward through the ventilation. Well, we'll check it out in the future. What is this woman doing there? She's probably not herself anymore. I was mentally rejoicing at my little victory. Fuck. The main one exclaimed loudly and hit the table. Stabilization takes too long. The woman was indignant, becoming more and more nervous. As expected. I snorted, watching what was happening. The type of person who is sensitive to what is dear to him. If they are deprived of this, they lose control of themselves. And the second goal was also achieved. I mentally summed up the result and smiled contentedly, rejoicing at what was happening. Exactly. The division between Eugene Kisaragi and the soldiers. This created a big rift between her and the guards, who initially did not like the cat. They use the best meat they can't even eat as cat food 3 times a day. The guard watched with envy as Eugene could not get enough and move away from the animal eating selected meat. So a normal person will naturally get angry. In general, everything is simpler than it seems. There was anger at belonging to a class. Eugene Kisaragi belongs to the upper class in the megacorporation Noble Capital. Soldiers who were forced to obey implicitly, they were afraid of the consequences of a direct protest against her, and in the end, they chose the cat as a scapegoat to vent their anger. In other words, the cat acted as a shield. What if the scapegoat disappears in this situation? And what if they had to go through extra trouble trying to find the creature they hated so much? Will the soldiers be able to protect her like before? And not only. Eugene Kisaragi has lost confidence in her soldiers. She lost a most precious thing in her life because of the negligence of the guard. Thanks, cat. I mentally thanked the deceased and smiled contentedly again. It's time to appropriate the genetic data of Eugene Kisaragi. I decided, still watching her torment. What the fuck? She exclaimed, breaking the silence that had just come. She jerked away from the table and quickly moved somewhere. She approached one of the experiments, and her fingers quickly ran over the keys of the control panel. Suddenly, the experiment in the form of a lizard was immediately struck by current discharges, and Eugene only clenched her teeth harder from indignation. It's all because of her. She exclaimed again and moved past the flasks with the next experiments. In one of them floated a rather large head with purple skin, in another cylinder the floor of the alien's body, but without hands, in the third, an alien resembling a small dragon, but covered only with a layer of muscles and an ossified jaw. Suddenly Kisaragi seemed to feel something and immediately looked in the direction of another cylinder. The aggressively minded commander-in-chief was almost growling as she headed for the flask with experiment 26. If you think about it, she said, looking at the pink lump with displeasure, you were there too. Suddenly, Eugene's lips curved in a terrible smile. More like a maniac's smile. Minute. And now Kisaragi confidently presses one of the green keys, which they used with one of the employees to conduct an experiment of the interaction of this creature and the current. Immediately, small purple particles began to ply along the thin tubes towards the creature. Stop. Painfully. The creature, inaudible to man, screamed again. He was pierced by discharges again and again. Help. After a while, she raised her index finger over the button again in determination to press. But something distracted her and she immediately turned back. The woman left the room, leaving the creature to suffer from a charge of current and suffer in agony. I'm madder than ever. Well, what would it be like for you if you observed such a picture? This clot didn't do anything to her, so why should he suffer because of someone's whim? Joy. Suddenly the creature spoke and I was surprised by it. I looked at him. Apparently this entity noticed me and immediately waved one of the branches in my direction, so to speak. But I silently looked in his direction, deciding what I should do. I silently turned around and crawled away through the ventilation. Get away from this office. Get away from him. We can't talk right now. It flashed through my head. Instead of a few words of comfort, I'll give her what she really needs. Revenge. 2 hours have passed. How's it going? Eugene asked, reappearing in the captain's field of vision and clenching her fists. We're going on a search. Only the captain said coldly in response. Wait a little longer. The man continued, but he was interrupted. Captain. Eugene growled with indignation. No, son Samuel. Are you defying the will of noble capital? Kisaragi spoke. She already looked like a zombie. I am the captain of this ship, the man began to mumble, and sweat broke out on his forehead from excitement. The head of the research group, watch your statements. I can help you leave the position of captain. Unable to stand it, the woman shouted. Even in noble capital, abuse of authority is acceptable. The captain of the ship did not lose some calmness and continued to speak, while Eugene was almost grinding her teeth with indignation. I have the right to detain the head of the research group. Detain? Kisaragi exclaimed indignantly. Did you say to detain me? Here and there, the staff looked at her not with good intentions, and they were also angry for her antics. The captain had the right to detain the violator of the order. The man spoke. Are you crazy? Eugene persisted, still screaming. It's all very funny. I chuckled to myself, still watching this picture. It seems that there was a conflict between them even before my intervention. Shit. Eugene snorted and immediately headed away. Kisaragi, white with anger, walked in silence under the protection of 2 soldiers, only the dissatisfied gnashing of her teeth, and their steps were heard. Suddenly she paused at the door with the clear inscription toilet. I'm going to the bathroom for a while. She threw them and disappeared behind the door of the cherished room. Yes. One of the soldiers answered only briefly, not daring to put a stick in her wheels. The door closed right in front of them at the same moment. Hey, I'm going too. Suddenly, he said to his partner and moved, too, in need. The right moment. I exclaimed mentally and quickly moved along the ventilation to the grate that would go out to the women's room. Initially, one guard was supposed to follow her, but he didn't go because he suffered all day. Immediately, thoughts began to swarm in my head as I moved along the winding path of ventilation. In addition, the second guard also went to the toilet. So she was left alone. I swerved again into another turn, trying to catch up with my target as quickly as possible. And there is no security system that prevents me from passing. There can't be a better moment. I decided with confidence, approaching the coveted passage. I peeked out of the darkness, peering through the bars in search of my subject. Eugene leaned on the table where the washbasin was and looked down. We must not miss this opportunity. My gut immediately screamed. I quietly unscrewed the bolts while she was busy with her own affairs and, removing the grill, went outside. Eugene was washing her face so hard, as if she was trying to wash something off with water from her face. While she wasn't looking in the mirror and the sound of the water was my assistant, I climbed the wall behind her back to the ceiling. Having collected all the developed venom within the sting, I immediately tensed up, waiting for the right moment. On the tail, small branches of a wreath of green color swelled up next to the sting, and a small bag with accumulated liquid appeared under the sting, so to speak. While she was still busy with herself, I was getting closer by the second, preparing for everything that could happen in this room. Well, except for one more person in these four walls. We definitely don't need anyone else. Drops of cool water dripped down her face. Phew. She exhaled, dipping her hands into the slightly accumulated water in the sink and relaxing a little. Suddenly there was an incomprehensible sound. And Kisaragi's skin immediately went goosebumps. She tensed and immediately turned in the direction of the sound that frightened her. I didn't waste a second and, like a predator that was starving, rushed at her with its mouth open and its sting out. She wanted to scream, immediately staggering back a little, but the washbasin did not give much space. Either she managed to dodge or I miscalculated a little, but my sting flew millimeters from her head. I landed discontentedly on a mirrored surface. There's no time to waste. I immediately lunged again and rushed at her from behind. The distance is close, it is unlikely that she will have time to turn around or figure out how to run. My sting reached the target and the green liquid of the poison spread over her skin in black and green thin worms in different directions, penetrating deeper and deeper. Just flew off her lips, and the effect of paralysis immediately began to spread throughout her body. Ka. Only this sound filled the silence in the room. The woman clenched her teeth, and foam was coming out of her mouth. The veins on his face swelled and began to show bumps. She immediately landed on her knees. And then she fell face down on the cold tile. A viscous white liquid dripped onto the floor. It was dripping in big drops in front of her face. In front of her paralyzed body. I could barely contain my animal hunger in front of such a tasty morsel. My view was blocked by a veil that was intoxicating, and I could not think soberly. I was only hungry, and she was my lunch. What is she thinking about now? A thought flashed through my head, and I myself opened my mouth already a millimeter from her face, preparing to have a snack. Does he feel fear from what he saw? He's probably experiencing it. Her eyes are so bulging and her teeth are clenched to a squeak. It's the look of a cornered victim. Is he angry at what is happening? Or is he afraid of death? But it doesn't make sense anymore, her death is imminent. Burn in hell. I tasted her flesh and there was no stopping me. At that moment, I felt like her genetic information obtained from the blood through the stomach by blood vessels reached my brain. And then I realized that one of the guesses contained in my subconscious turned out to be correct. Suddenly, a system window with text appeared in front of me. The cub individual conditions for evolution are met. Do you want to evolve? And the answer options as usual are yes and no. I waited. I rejoiced mentally and opened my mouth, covered with the blood of my victim, contentedly. Without thinking twice, I immediately reached out with my claw covered in blood to the long-awaited yes option. But I was immediately struck by lightning, and a bunch of pictures flashed through my head. One of the soldiers comes into this room and sees me on a corpse. Without thinking twice, he points the weapon in my direction. A lot of shots hit me soon, and now my corpse is floating not only in the blood of my victim, but also in his own. My body was shaking, and I was amazed at what I saw for a fraction of a second. What the fuck was that just now? I immediately swore inwardly. Is this the predator's instinct? I was immediately puzzled, scratching my head. So that's how it works? It turns out that the guard will arrive soon. I immediately began to think about the plan of action. Can I run away? No. I immediately asked. Time with Gulkin horseradish. I immediately climbed up the wall, leaving a trail of blood behind me. I'll kill him too. I thought resolutely, trying to hide. Soon, indeed, there was a trampling of feet. One of the guards went into the toilet and was immediately very surprised by the picture he saw. The guard was dumbfounded and stared at it with bulging eyes, and beads of sweat appeared on his face. His body went limp. In front of him lay the body of the murdered Isekai'd, and not far from him was a head with eyes rolled up and saliva still dripping from his mouth. "What for bullshit?" only the man muttered, shackled from shock. But I didn't waste a second. I was immediately behind him. In his blind spot. But he noticed me as soon as he felt my weight. I didn't manage to accumulate much poison, and I just pierced him with a sting in an unprotected area. After all, their helmets are not worth a damn. Blood immediately gushed out in a fountain. Nevertheless, I pierced some important point on the body. The body, like a sack of potatoes, fell to the floor with a crash. That's it, he's ready. His body leaned against the wall of one of the booths and sat as if the man decided to rest. Funny. Without thinking twice, I immediately rushed to the ventilation in order to escape from here as quickly as possible. I don't know when another one will show up. I'll hurry up. Pushing aside the twisted grate, I thought, and immediately disappeared. There is a possibility that I didn't even suspect about some means of tracking, so I'll make up for the lapse and go to the nest. I decided, having thought through my plan of action. I sat in the nest and studied the area with the help of impulses and tuned into the right wave, as if meditating. It's all clear. I thought and looked around once more. Good. Let's go. I finally made up my mind and confidently pressed the yes option with my claw. The text in the system window immediately changed. The evolution process is activated. The cub is an individual. My claws seemed to vibrate, or rather there was some kind of itching. But it wasn't for long, just a fraction of a second. And now large drops of viscous liquid appeared on it, which did not even really drain, but only appeared here and there. I immediately tensed up. But this muck started to appear from everywhere and block my visibility zone. She covered my head with decent streams of discharge, and I completely drowned in her. Then the slurry solidified at the same moment. She became like a cocoon, inside of which I was. I'm like a butterfly. More precisely, a caterpillar in a cocoon. Surprisingly. Did the embryo's memories look like this? I was puzzled, being in the warmth of the slurry. I feel like a completely different being. The slime is pulling something else out of me. I thought, and my chitin crumbled into particles and lagged behind the skin. I want to open my eyes and see how it happens, but I can't. Control over the body is lost, because now I'm in a cocoon. I did what I could. It flashed through my head, and hundreds of bubbles came out of my mouth. It remains only to wait. The nest, consisting of many pipes creeping along the walls with green slime stuck to them, plunged into darkness. Only one ray of light slightly whiter than usual fell on my cocoon in the center of the nest. Soon the slurry began to harden, which was on the pipes, and small particles began to fall on the cocoon. A little time and a vibration passed through the cocoon. Another moment and a deep crack appeared in the middle of the cocoon. Purple-blue skin appeared, prehensile paws covered with transparent viscous liquid, like someone's snot. I first rested on one of the paws, then on the other, in order to get out of my tomb of evolution. I stood on the remains of the evolution slurry that was left to line the bottom of my nest. Columns of steam were coming from me, and I was already more massive than before. Oh, now I don't have claws, but normal paws, with which you can normally take something at any moment. There are more teeth, they are already larger than the previous ones and no less sharp. I straightened up and let out a low cry, as if clearing my throat. My nest is far away and no one will hear me for sure. Head of the medical team, have you determined the cause of death? The captain spoke, folding his hands under his chin. Yes, if you look with the naked eye, the medic said, analyzing his reports. The cause of death is a blow to the throat. It seems to have been done with a small saw, the man continued to tell the information, puzzling the others sitting. But I think I'll find out only after a detailed examination. Detailed inspection. Does that mean we have to do an autopsy? The captain concluded the result. What would you do? After the silence, the doctor was puzzled. Ugh, damn it. The captain swore and sighed heavily, still straining those present. The captain hid his face with his hands and spoke. I don't know. Head of the security system. The captain turned, covering his excitement. How are things with the search? All the surveillance cameras on board were checked, but nothing special was found. The information was minted by a tall man with light hair color. The main suspect, a security guard, is currently being interrogated. Do you think he's a criminal? The captain asked, which immediately strained the head of the security system. If we rely on the information we have today, I don't think so. A man with blonde hair held the answer right there. Let us know as soon as the results are available. The captain spoke. They were all scared and stressed by the current situation. And so, the captain spoke and immediately squinted at the empty seat at the table. You all know what happened recently in the lab. The captain continued. Everyone immediately remembered the horror that appeared to their eyes, and immediately a mask of horror was put on their faces. And it's unlikely you'll forget a headless corpse so quickly. One of the most promising employees ended up in the capsule because of the head of the research group. A faceted high flask with a transparent liquid, inside which the brain floats. 2 round eye proteins extend to it with thin ropes of vessels, and the spinal cord is thin like threads down from the brain. The brain was extracted alive and placed in a laboratory. This awaits everyone who disobeyed, so what kind of punishment will be for those involved in the death of noble capital? The captain spoke, still looking sternly at those present. If you don't want to be electrocuted, leaving only the brain, you have to take action. The captain rapped out, and everyone's faces were already distorted by a mask of horror and insane fear. Everyone was afraid for their skins. Can I say that an accident occurred during the experiment? A man with a chocolate shade of hair expressed his thought. Think before you say that, chief of the navigation group. The head of the medical team spoke, crossing his arms under his chest and leaning against the table. And then how to explain the fact that one researcher died? Oh, so that's it? The brown-haired man sighed. That's why you still belong to Middle Capital. What? His interlocutor immediately exclaimed. What about this one? A man with glasses and a receding hairline exclaimed as he got up from his seat. Due to improper nutrition. He started, but was immediately interrupted. We are mired in the abyss of mud. Someone exclaimed at his cut, raising his voice. If you want to die, then without me. Head of the technical team. What? They shouted back at him. You can't do anything else except cook rice. They retorted in response. Do you deservedly belong to capital? A scuffle between the leaders immediately began, not directly shy of the ship's captain. As if he wasn't there at all. Quietly. Someone couldn't stand it and immediately banged his fist on the table. The disturbances only aggravate the situation. Exclaimed a dark-haired man with a yellow tinge of eyes and a scar crossing the lip line. Everyone immediately stopped at the place where they were. The heads of medicine and navigation stood rooted to the spot, while the head of the technical team beat up his interlocutor. Captain. The brunette turned to the man in the center of their table. Now we are near the planet C08. Is something wrong? The captain of the ship asked in response. C08 is the space dog's zone. The brunette explained. Do you want to make it look like the puppies caused trouble? The captain voiced, trying to understand the train of thought of one of his subordinates. Yes. Confirmed the interlocutor. Let's pretend that we were attacked. Space dogs. A man with a bald head like a billiard ball was thinking. Space dogs are one of the main enemies of megacorporations, as they roam the cosmos and rob. They have extensive experience in interfleet battles. Ships under the command of veterans often get damaged. The research ship could be another target. And the damage will be irreparable. An accident can still happen. If we were informed, the captain reflected, that we had been attacked, the death of the head of the research team could be hushed up. This is the case, the captain finally said aloud, approving the idea of a subordinate, although one thing must be taken into account, but we are powerless with our weapons against space dogs. I have connections with old friends. The brunette assured him, which stunned other managers. Don't worry about that. He never ceases to amaze, the captain thought again, also these connections with pirates. What about money? Only the captain voiced it after thinking. At least 1 million credits. The brunette was stunned by his amount, from which the captain gritted his teeth. Bitch. The bald man cursed inwardly. Eugene Kisaragi is too tough even for space dogs. The brunette continued to push his speech. Therefore, the risk on their part is justified by the price range. Well, all right, the captain finally delivered his verdict, gritting his teeth at this turn of events, but it was the only way out of the situation. Do it. And hurry up to meet the shortest possible time. Thank you, Captain. The brunette said in response and bowed slightly. Let's rely on the head of the crisis management department in this difficult matter. This concludes the meeting. Captain Toto spoke. But immediately the head of the medical team jumped up from his seat, raising his hand. But what to do with the body? After a little hesitation, he still asked. "Save it for now," the captain said. "We'll give it to the pirates. Don't let anyone near the corpse." That's right. Only a chorus was followed by a response from subordinates. I was in my nest. How I've grown. This adult or adolescent individual is quite large in relation to the nursery size. Now it's clear how to feel like an individual. It flashed through my head. An indescribable feeling. Now it is possible to revise the plan of further actions. Previously, I had to sit in the dark to survive, but now hunting and survival have become identical concepts. A tall individual, as tall as a man. 2 pairs of long muscular arms and a pair of small ones on the chest. The torso is wide, the pelvis is much narrower, a little out of proportion, but this is not the main thing. On the back, the vertebrae acquired appendages that look like a bony mohawk, but on the back. That's what we'll decide. I decided, looking at the system window and crossing my small paws on my chest, while one of the long paws began to mechanically scratch the back of my head. So, what is the next goal? The following text was written in white font on the blue system window. Race. Unidentified hostile cosmic matter, NVCM, condition. Individual goal. Survive, evolution. Successful 1, special skills. Predator's sense, fusion, wings, chitinous shell, survivability, paralyzing sting, enhanced exoskeleton, acidic blood. Postscript type? Not defined. The evolution process has been successfully completed. I immediately thought, studying the information. Is this an indicator that I have become an individual? The amorphous has a 6-step branch of evolution, 5 of which goes to transformation. The cub. An individual. The individual is a teenager. A young individual. An adult. And an ascended individual. The latter kind of evolution is considered the ultimate form of the amorphous in the space survival universe. In other words, this is the limit. Upon reaching the last form of evolution, the mystery of the origin of the race is revealed in the game. A monster with a semblance of a bone mask from which 4 bone appendages wriggle in different directions. The tongue is like a bundle of many thin tentacles. 2 rows of teeth top and bottom. On the back of the neck, many small tentacles also grow in different directions. There is a bone covering on the chest, like a bulletproof vest. Where did it come from? Who are the amorphs and so on? There is a possibility that something like this may be waiting for me in real life. In order to achieve a full-fledged form of any race, it is necessary to make a lot of effort. I thought, studying the same system window. Only 20 people have seen her all the time. But only I saw the final form of the amorpha. The thought struck me immediately. If you think about it. Thoughts began to stir again in my head. A new characteristic type became available to me. And he ran his finger into the corner with the inscription that interested me. If you look at my stats, will I be able to strengthen my body? I was immediately puzzled, and the text on the system window changed to a question with multiple answers. Unblockable type. Would you like to see the list of types? And the answer options are yes and no. Shall we try? I immediately pointed one of the fingers of the individual at the option yes. Well. As expected, I have almost fulfilled the conditions for strengthening the body. I thought when I saw what the inscriptions had changed to. There was already other information on the blue system window, but no less interesting. There are 2 types available for you. Type of strengthening of physical strength, 6 out of 10, type of superpower enhancement, 1.5 out of 3. Such indicators appeared due to the transformation, which strengthened the exoskeleton and acidic blood. The type resembles the specialization of the race, but has a slightly different purpose. It is activated only when specific conditions are met. And it is directly related to skills. But where does 0. 5 come from? I was puzzled when I saw this figure. Most likely, 1 ball for the instinct of a predator. I was thinking, still studying the new data. I no longer have the skills that would be suitable for. I was thinking, mentally recalling my meals. Spiders, cockroaches, a cat. There doesn't seem to be anything suitable. I absorbed everything I could. Straining my brain, I was covered with perspiration, but nothing really came to mind. Suddenly it dawned on me. I understood. Eugene Kisaragi. I've tasted her flesh. And I immediately remembered this woman with a cold gaze piercing through. So my guesses were correct and she had psychic abilities. I have to get this power. Time to find a corpse. And I immediately rushed to the place I was looking for, climbing the pipes. It was not difficult to remove the ventilation grate. But to get through them. Ventilation airlocks are now terribly inconvenient to move. It sucks. Suddenly I felt a subtle smell. He was familiar to me, or rather, I immediately recognized the smell of what I was feeling. The smell of rigor mortis. A thought flashed through my head and I followed his lead. Hovering over the room from which such a wonderful aroma was coming, I looked through the ventilation grate. And here he is. As soon as I opened my mouth, drool immediately began to drip from my mouth. It feels like I haven't eaten for a very long time, and now they are beckoning me with a delicacy. Morgue. A thought flashed through my head again. It's like a buffet, by God. What could be more wonderful? The dead man's cell is right below me. There was barely audible music playing in the guy's headphones. On one of the boxes there was a sort of name card or just a signature, in order to determine who was immersed in his longest sleep. Eugene Kisaragi read one such inscription. Above the plate is a screen on which an eyeball with an iris and a pupil is displayed in high magnification. Suddenly, something began to fill the room with boxes. The boxes with the bodies were fenced off by a glass wall. At a table almost in the center of the room sits a brunette in a snow-white medical gown and searches for something or reprints in the database, but he is deaf to external sounds that break the silence. Music was still playing in his headphones, which was muffled for me. Suddenly the smell intensified and it strained, so to speak, the observer of this place. What's that smell? The guy was puzzled and, taking off his headphones, followed to the boxes with the bodies. A picture appeared to his eyes that terrified the brunette and he could not move. What the? Only he said. His attention was presented with such a picture as a burned hole in the floor surface from which such a bad smell was coming. The edges of the hole are covered with green slime, which slowly flowed down. I was under the ceiling and watched what was happening, like a hunter after a victim driven into a corner. Acid? The morgue supervisor was surprised and perspiration appeared on his face. From where? Recovering a little from the shock, he looked over his shoulder. Thoughts ran chaotically, but went in a more or less correct direction. We need to call security. But I didn't give him that privilege. I immediately rushed at this kid as soon as he had time to be surprised. Hey! My sting immediately pierced through his head. And the body immediately, like a sack of potatoes, fell to the floor on a puddle of spreading brown liquid. Opening the box, in the distance, I saw the open feet of the corpse of the victim I needed. I pulled out the shelf on which it rested. And with a deft movement of his clawed paw, he pulled off the snow-white sheet. Here it is. Eugene's body matched the color of the sheet, the same snow-white. The girl's hair, the color of a raven wing, stood out vividly against a background of it. There was something attached to his neck. Something that fixed the body on a kind of couch, similar to a wide fabric tape. She didn't change even after death. I said in my mind. And they are forbidden to touch it. I rejoiced subconsciously at this thought and with a deft jerk, grabbed her head with my clawed paw. And that's strange. Even after killing so many people, I don't feel guilty. I thought, detaching my head from her body. It can be seen that the patch hid this separation. The edges of the cut had turned blue from the onset of rigor mortis, and there were still bits of blood that had frozen on the torn edges of the flesh. They say that when the environment changes, you change yourself. A philosophical thought flashed through my mind while I was enjoying the view of her head because I also changed when I became an amorphous. Or this ruthless killer monster was my real self. Nothing will be solved even thinking about it. The drool of hunger filled my mouth. I immediately opened my mouth in anticipation of the delicacy that I am in a hurry to taste. It's time to eat. I immediately bit, first into her head, then into her flesh. Tearing into pieces and enjoying the taste of his silent victim. To survive, you have to keep killing. Such is Morph's life and his ability to adapt. After death, it will rot and become a breeding ground for nature. So if she's going to be my nutrient, is that nature's providence? Suddenly I got something on the tooth. Something hard and metallic, but it definitely wasn't blood. I opened my mouth in disbelief. A small round device lay on my tongue and was highlighted in blue. Is it from the heart? I took this metal roundel in my left chalk paw and decided to examine it. I don't understand what this thing is for. Maybe she had heart problems. I was immediately puzzled, squeezing hard and thereby breaking the device into small pieces. I was immediately startled by the system window that suddenly appeared. As expected. Eugene Kisaragi had psychedelic powers. On the blue screen, the text read. Predator effect activated. Extrasensory perception. Successful acquisition of genetic data. Abduction of extrasensory perception among the biological properties of man. Apply extrasensory perception? And the answer options are yes and no. What is it? I was puzzled when I received new information. Amorphous can use psychedelic power without supernatural abilities. I was thinking, reading the text of the system window and scratching my neck. And it's nothing to me. I will not think negatively. I decided and immediately pressed the button with the answer option yes. To get the type, I still have to accept. Suddenly, from the elongated layer of my head, many tentacles of medium length and thickness of a burgundy shade burst out. So this is what the amorphous looks like. I thought, feeling my new acquisition with small paws of the first pair of limbs. Interesting. The predator's sense is always activated suddenly. I reasoned, starting on the second, but fresh corpse. Fortunately, it can be useful in combination with other skills. I finished with Kisaragi. I took the man's corpse by the hand and put his palm surface to one of the digital screens on the boxes, but you can still have a snack and security. The guards have some very delicate taste. Maybe because they have a lot of muscles, it feels like I'm chewing hopchin. I reasoned, savoring my victims. But I was distracted by a premonition. A premonition of danger. I immediately distracted myself from eating and turned in the direction from where I felt bad. Changing of the guard. It came to my mind. There aren't many people on the ship in reinforced protective gear. They passed their suit to another. I thought. It was as if I immediately saw them in front of me. So that's what the new ability is. One helps equip the other. The third stands with a gun at the ready and watches. Well, or just waiting for them. Will they change the doctor too? I was immediately puzzled. When the replacement comes, he will certainly notice it. I immediately looked at the corpse of the doctor leaning against a wall in a sitting position. Because this is the space age. Of course, they will think that the monster is also here. And I imagined a lot of people dumbfounded by fright and harsh reality. I'm not strong enough yet to start an all-consuming war with the members of the ship. I was puzzled over the upcoming. Furthermore, I need something that can stall for time until I get strong. It suddenly dawned on me, changing the course of my thoughts on the situation. Well, it was in the morgue. I thought, squinting at the hole in the floor from which a fetid aroma still emanated. Preservatives and chemicals for the treatment of the corpse. An idea occurred to me. Suddenly, a tempting idea came to my mind. Intimidate the ship's crew when they are going through a crisis. Megacorporation does not have an official capital. But there is a place that can be called the center. And this place is Earth. The headquarters and center of the current megacorporation, the 5 companies that contributed to the creation of the megacorporation, are the kings of the Earth. The man who was engaged in farming seemed to sense their presence and immediately stood up. I've been waiting a long time. He spoke to them. The brunette in the suit was wearing sunglasses, the gray-haired one had a mustache and beard, as well as glasses for vision on the bridge of his nose. The brunette looked like someone's bodyguard, the man with gray hair looked more like a butler. Come here. A shaven-haired brunette moved forward, a gray-haired man just nodded after him. What happened? A man with a hoe in his hand asked. About Miss. The shaved brunette started. Miss Kisaragi. The gray-haired man immediately began to sweat in anticipation of the outcome of this conversation. Ah, the third daughter. The disheveled brunette exclaimed. So what happened? He smiled radiantly, not even anticipating any trouble. Her signal apparatus was destroyed. A shaved brunette minted it. This can't be happening. I didn't force Kisaragi to do anything burdensome. The last signal came from C08. The brunette in sunglasses continued. As it turned out, this is the territory of space dogs. Only a disheveled brunette spoke in response. Well. He started and immediately put his hand on the shoulder of the man in the suit. Less than a minute later, a shaved man was hit in the head by a strong fist from Eugene Kisaragi's father. He also threw the body of this man aside with a powerful blow, and blood splashes followed the victim in a train. Mr. Eugene approached the man, who was still alive, but shuddering and covered with blood splashes. And he continued to mercilessly strike blow after blow, but no longer with his fist, but with a metal-pointed hoe. Soon, the slightly twisted instrument, covered with a scarlet liquid, flew to the side. Get rid of it. Mr. Eugene spoke. Yes. Came from behind him. The body was surrounded by a group of men in suits. They covered him with a sheet and prepared to carry him away. I don't need a tool to look for answers to unanswered questions. The most important thing for us is the tools, do you know? Mr. Eugene spoke, clasping his bloody hands behind his back. Yes. I'll be careful. One of the men spoke in response and bowed. 1 billion credits went to Kisaragi's upbringing. This is equivalent to the cost of developing a new battleship. Mr. Eugene spoke and put his hands in his trousers pockets. I made her do a genetic modification to improve her genes. Can some pirate touch this child? I wonder who dared to harm the beloved Eugene family? Wiping the blood from his chin, the man continued to ponder. The captain of the ship Kisaragi was on board was Yuzen Samuel, right? Yes. The white-haired man answered, lowering his head. If this is the Samuel family, Mr. Eugene continued to reason, throwing back the rag, the Titan satellite. That case is gaining an interesting turn. But that's not his job. Edgerton's child is a coward. The brunette said with a smile. He doesn't have the guts to get his teeth into the Eugene family. Ah. He exhaled and abruptly turned to the gray-haired man. What do you think, old man? I think Jan intervened. The man with glasses spoke. Huh, you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. Kisaragi's father chuckled. Tane and Edgerton seem to be fighting for control of Jupiter, but in fact they are in cahoots. Because Edgerton's credits come from Jan. This snake is ready to take the lead on the board of directors, you know? Kisaragi's father spoke. Yes. The gray-haired man replied. Chamberlain, the owner of Tian, holds the position of CEO, in other words, he holds the throne of the owner. Yes. Mr. Eugene agreed. I am afraid, seeing that this insolent fool is resolutely aimed against me. Kisaragi's father immediately laughed. And just as abruptly stopped, changing emotions to more serious ones. We have a reason, so we will strike first. Tell your family about it. The brunette gave instructions. Yes. The gray-haired man said, and immediately bowed. C-08 was enveloped in a shadow. Kisaragi's father spoke. Contact them and figure it out. I understood. The white-haired man's reply came again. The bloody wind is blowing. It flashed through his mind. Yuzen Samuel and those suddenly raised his voice, breaking into a cry of a brunette aged who had anything to do with the ship. Bring each of them to me. The one who destroyed my assets, the man continued without slowing down the timbre, deserves to die. He was terrible in anger, especially still in his clothes covered with the blood of the bad messenger. Clouds of steam were floating around. They were present all around the perimeter of the square, surrounding people from different sides. The whitish steam hovered in the air and did not dissipate. This? Gritting his teeth in anger, the captain said. His body was shaking with a small tremor from indignation at this situation. He could barely contain his indignation so as not to explode like a barrel of dynamite. But there is a limit to everything. What the hell is this? He exclaimed so loudly that he could be heard in the neighboring departments of the ship. There was a hole in the wall of the room that had once been a morgue. Clouds of steam came from the floor and rose to the ceiling. He was surrounded by guards. On the left and on the right hand of him stood one equipped guard. In front of him, a group of people in snow-white robes sat in a state of shock next to what had once been people. Now they were either charred or acid-corroded remains. Somewhere the head is guessed, somewhere else the remains of trousers, the other body has only a semblance of the remaining head after exposure to some chemical. The rest of the parts have disintegrated, the hands are a mess, the body is corroded by the floors. You say, after a minute of silence, the captain broke the silence, there was smoke in the room? It's strange, because when we entered, everything pointed to a fire. He muttered after hearing the results of the inspection from the equipped soldiers. All right. Confirmed one of them. I wanted to find out what happened right away, but only doctors are allowed to enter. One of the soldiers continued, to which he received only silence in response. There was mayhem and chaos. Some of the laboratory assistants wrote down a report in notebooks that they were observing at this crime scene, others covered the remains with sheets, hiding the bloody truth from the eyes of others. Here and there lies a lot of mangled equipment and furniture that once filled this area. I don't understand. Finally, the captain spoke, still watching this terrible picture and trying to figure out what had happened. How could there be a fire in the morgue? The head of the medical team decided to examine one of the burned corpses. The hand of the body still had its shape, the fingers on one of which was not melted, which is surprising, from such a temperature, the ring was different. Well, if it was a fire, then why did it remain as if untouched? Judging by the ring, the gray-haired man mused, is this a team member who worked overtime? But suddenly something surprised him very much, and perspiration appeared on his face. He immediately turned to one of the workers, who at that time was taking notes in the report. Are these all bodies? He asked immediately. Yes, why? Only there was an answer in his direction. This can't be happening. The head of medicine muttered. He definitely did not find someone in the bodies present here, and was even more amazed by this. The head of the medical team? This reaction of the gray-haired man did not hide from the sensitive gaze of the captain, from which a question immediately followed. "Captain," the leader muttered, trying to control himself, but arriving still in shock from what was happening. "Call all the leaders of the ship. We have a problem." He was paler than the dead, something scared him very much. "What?" The question sounded in raised tones, breaking the silence, leaving a ringing in the ears. At a large table shaped like a shield, the members of the council, the leaders of a particular industry, are sitting again. "The bodies of the guard and the head of the research team are missing?" The captain raised his voice again, voicing a question. "They couldn't have left on their own, could they?" The captain was indignant at this turn of events. At the same time, he was shocked by what he heard. At the same time, he was angry at this turn of events. "The head of the medical team." He shouted in the direction of the white-haired man. "Are you sure?" "I checked several times." The gray-haired man was justifying himself, and sweat from excitement appeared on his face again. "However, exactly 2 bodies are missing. And that's not all. If we talk about chemicals stored in the morgue, of course, they can ignite, but a fire of this magnitude is extremely rare." The head of medicine finished his speech with his assumptions. "In other words." A dark-haired man in a blue uniform jacket spoke. He was sitting next to the gray-haired man with his arms crossed over his chest. "This fire was created artificially." "Who the hell did this?" the head of the technical team asked, without taking his eyes off the head of the medical team. "Maybe there are unidentified alien creatures on board?" A blonde man in a dark gray uniform voiced his guess aloud. He was sitting next to the head of the technical team. His voice sounded calm, in principle, as he himself held himself. He sat with his hands clasped together in a lock. "Is this some kind of joke?" Suddenly, a man with milk chocolate-colored hair raised his voice, from which the blonde was immediately taken aback and jumped a little in his place. "Don't talk nonsense." "What are you?" a blonde man in a dark gray uniform answered sharply, sitting normally in a chair, the head of the logistics department. He squinted at the man sitting next to him, who also scared him. A stout man in the same uniform, with a shock of hair the color of milk chocolate, stubble on his chin. "I just assumed, why are you so nervous?" In response, there was only a soft cough. A more serious problem in the current situation is that the body of the head of the research group has disappeared. The head of the medical team interrupted them. "Haven't we decided to contact the pirates?" The captain spoke up, reminding his staff of his presence. "We need to find the body at any cost. Is that clear to you?" He gave his order immediately, standing up and leaning on the surface of the table. "Find the culprit first." The blonde man began, raising his hand as if in school for an answer. "Damn." The captain could not stand it, raising his voice even stronger, from which the blonde-haired man was immediately taken aback and began to lower his hand, covered with perspiration. "It's not just about me." The captain was yelling, staring at his department commanders-in-chief. "If you are afraid of revenge from noble capital representatives, then start cooperating already." After that, a deathly silence followed, only breathing and the tolerable hum of technology could be heard. "Head of the Crisis Management Department, have you contacted the pirates yet?" The captain continued more calmly, turning to a dark-haired man in a blue uniform with a scar on his lips. "Yes," the answer immediately followed without delay. "Right after our meeting." "Damn." The captain cursed, clutching his head. "Don't tell them anything. Tell them we'll just give them the body. Will everything be all right?" The head of the Crisis Management Department immediately asked. "This is your idea," was the captain's reply. "If we don't find a way out, then there will be another problem. Just find the body before you meet them." Suddenly, the captain's hand fell sharply on the shoulder of one of the leaders and squeezed him tighter. "Head of the security department, is it clear to you? You have to catch the culprit." The captain sounded his message threateningly seriously. A blonde man in a dark gray uniform was even taken aback by what had happened and turned slightly over his shoulder, covered with perspiration. "We are doing our best," he mumbled in response, feeling the strong grip of the ship's captain on his shoulder. "You're not trying hard enough." Only the answer followed. "You can interrogate all the crew members, find the culprit," the captain said loudly, without slowing down his pressure and hovering over the head of the security department. "I will give you the appropriate authority." "Ahem. We will definitely find the body," said one of them while I was watching this picture through the mesh of the ventilation hatch. "I believe," the captain replied. "What an interesting picture after all. The plan worked." A thought immediately flashed through my mind and I smiled contentedly, baring my sharp teeth. How easy is it to hide your identity and intimidate your enemies? Set a fire. Who would have thought that an alien creature could set a fire in a morgue? I found a cabinet with a lot of test tubes of different colors from dark yellow like bees to ordinary red and green. They were all filled with chemicals that helped me in this difficult task. They stood in an ordinary cabinet behind a thin fragile edge of glass. Such is the protection of dangerous chemicals. The toxic substance was created from a mixture of chemicals on my finger. I made a small incision, and drops of green viscous liquid appeared on the surface of the plum-colored skin. And a couple of drops of acidic blood. Everything went smoothly, the flames took care of the corpses, however bright scarlet and orange flashes of fire immediately flooded the room, filling the space of the room and black acrid smoke at the same time. I didn't think it would be about aliens. I thought and lay down comfortably. My soul sank into my heels. The captain must have lost his mind to decide to contact this space junk. I continued to reason, still watching what was happening. It seems to be this man. My gaze fell on a brunette in a blue uniform jacket with a black rectangle on the back. The head of the crisis management department, however, I will check it later. Who knows, maybe he's in cahoots with the pirates. Pirates are of different races, so I can get a lot of gene essences, however, an assault can reduce the number of genes I can get on this research vessel. I was thinking, still watching the people already going to their offices. Anyway, I'll make a decision when I find out how good this space junk is. And I suddenly caught something with my location. This guy. My attention immediately switched to an equally interesting character of this entire human team. A heaviside man with a short bob haircut and a stubble. He walked, looking down at the floor and saddened by something. Exactly. Isn't it the head of the logistics department who denied my existence? He has nothing to do with the situation, so why did he say that? The man seemed to feel someone's presence and immediately began to light up on the sides in search of the stalker. He went to a small screen and immediately put his palm so that the device could count his fingerprints. Cargo hold? The door hissed open, letting him into the room. He is the head of the logistics department, so visiting the cargo hold is normal for him, I thought, trying to keep an eye on the intended object, but his alertness looks unnatural. What did he have hidden, since he reacted like that? I approached the hatch grating, the branch of which opened into the cargo compartment, so that it would be more convenient to watch my pig. Wait a second, what is this container? I noticed the location of a large container whose doors were blocked by steel bars attached to the frame. There was also a small screen on the container, which they used to identify the person in order to get somewhere. A kind of combination lock. The trail of the head of the department ends here. Fingerprint scanner and ID card login system. The security of this container is higher than that of others. I was thinking, still looking at the thing interesting to me. Its walls are so thick that I can't find out what's going on inside, even with the help of extrasensory perception. There must be something very important hidden there. I was even curious. I was thinking, putting my finger to my chin, interested in the container. Initially, I was going to eliminate the head of the medical team, but I changed my mind. My next target is this man. Ka. It's time to get drunk. Someone exclaimed and noisily put a faceted glass on the surface, causing the cloudy liquid to jump in the container and spill a little on the table. Head of department, you've had enough. A thin boy spoke, looking in the direction of a heavy man. They were together at the bar and drinking something. One more. The head of the logistics department muttered, handing an already empty glass to the bartender, a gray-haired man with a thick mustache, peacefully wiping a glass bottle. Why are you sweating so much? The skinny kid spoke up again. What has been happening lately is difficult to call life. A thought flashed through the head of a fat man while he was bringing another portion of alcohol to his mouth. He was really covered in sweat, and it's not clear whether he didn't like the temperature of the ship or whether he was very worried about something. Maybe you shouldn't have trusted a colt dealer on the black market? Mentally he asked himself, remembering the pictures of the past. How he himself, standing in front of the merchant, listened to a resident of another planet, a creature with a lilac skin tone, small horns, blonde hair cut into a square, in a black hoodie, and with a small curtain covering half of his face. In front of her, her product was presented like a half-open pistachio, between the shells of which an unknown brown viscous something. She said they were found in ancient ruins. I decided that this could be used to make money, that's why I brought them here. The man began to think again mentally. And in the subconscious, a picture of the past surfaced again, how he delivers a container with the help of a transportation device and looks around. We agreed on a deal, secretly loaded the eggs on board. Everything was fine. But one day, when I decided to drink, one egg hatched. Once again, a thought passed through his mind. And the picture of the past was replaced by another. A blue container with small cells containing glass tubes with metal edging at both ends. In one of the cells from the cylinder, only fragments and the shell of an alien egg remained. If the container had been tightly closed that day. He was thinking again. The present time. A man wanders down the corridor after another binge to his room. "Who's here?" He exclaimed into the void and immediately turned around, peering if there was anyone nearby. But there was no one behind him. Only an empty long corridor filled with oppressive silence. He stood still for a while, listening to all the sounds that could suddenly be heard, but the silence was broken only by his rapid breathing due to increased excitement. Damn. Well, since the fuck was used before, then why not? He just muttered to himself, trying to calm down a little at this moment. It sucks. He cursed again, and his body increased sweating from excitement. Suddenly, he felt some strange smell suddenly surrounding him in this space and immediately tensed up. It seemed to make him dizzy, and in principle it could not help but strain him. That was all quiet without any hints of something, and then suddenly there's a strange annoying smell. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that something had penetrated the ventilation. It has a long tail and powerful hind legs, similar to the paws of some animal. But what is strange, the skin is purple. He was immediately seriously frightened by this. What? It flashed through his mind immediately, but he was silent, as if his tongue was numb from the shock he was experiencing. What the hell? He exclaimed mentally and immediately rushed towards his room with all his might, without looking back, and not even trying to write off alcohol glitches. The main thing is not to check whether the head is joking with him, or everything is actually happening in reality. Damn. Mentally he cursed, still without slowing down. Tears immediately came out of her eyes. He couldn't calm down and calm them down. He really needed to get to the room as soon as possible and close the door behind him. Open up faster. He shouted in his mind, constantly poking at the numeric buttons on the screen. But suddenly the panel succumbed to the entered code, and the door immediately moved to the side with a rustle, disappearing into the interstitial space. The man immediately flew into the room. More precisely, he fell like a sack of potatoes, not calculating that the barrier in the form of a door would disappear so quickly, and he would lose his balance. Empty glass bottles were lying around him, and one of the slippers had left his hind limb. Telephone. The man stammered. "I need to make a call." Trembling with fright, he crawled towards the object he was looking for. A red handset on a red platform with a digital panel. Peek. 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 It was heard outside the door. A sound that brought even more fear. Drool dripped from his mouth every now and then, and sweat trickled down his skin. Peek. Peek. He understood that it was the sound of the code buttons on the panel in front of the entrance. The number of digits in the code was getting smaller. He turned towards the door, and tears started coming out of his eyes again. Pipik. With a rustle, the door disappeared into the interstitial space again. In front of him was me in full height. His terrible nightmare from which he tried to escape so quickly. And now he's shaking and drooling, crying his eyes out. He can smell death. He sees a big monster in front of him with burning eyes and drooling from hunger. I slowly approached him, delaying the moment of pleasure. They say that the meat of a victim who experiences fear has its own wonderful taste. I loomed over him, showing a wide mouth and a lot of razor-sharp teeth, which drooled every now and then from unbearable hunger. And he just shakes and cries. "Enjoy your meal." I just said it to myself and immediately bit into my victim. It was easy to kill him because of his cheeky lifestyle. Thoughts swarmed in my head as I looked around my victim's room. A bunch of empty bottles, a pack of cigarettes, some books, sheets, scattered things. And a word junk. He spent all his time in the bar. I also found crumpled things in the drawers. There are empty cans of something on the dresser, scattered socks, uneaten soup. A real salary thief. I thought immediately. The captain should be grateful to me. I thought and grinned. Because I am reducing the number of people in the state who are paid salaries in vain. I justified my attacks immediately. I would clean up here a little. I thought as I wandered through this pigsty covered in blood splashes. Blood everywhere, especially where the victim's body was. The wall and part of the floor are smeared with it. It's fucking dirty. I swore. Where is his ID card? I thought with a heavy sigh. Wherever I have not looked for her among this junk, but she was not even close, which is not very pleasing. A medium-sized poster of a model in a scarlet bikini caught my attention. On pale skin, it looks quite impressive. And the hair is an unusual color, the color of seawater. although this color is pale against the background of the skin. She looks sexy, but I don't feel anything in such a body. I thought, crossing my little paws on my chest and sighing in disappointment. I continued to search the room when suddenly the object I was looking for finally fell out of the bright yellow folder I had just taken. Namely, what I was looking for is an ID card. A thin rectangular plastic of small size with a blue stripe at the top and a stroke under it on one of the sides. Great, I found her. Mentally, I was immediately delighted. On the other side of the map I saw a photo of my once-eaten lunch. I've collected everything I need. I mentally decided, taking the key card and the left hand of my victim for this. And, before leaving, you need to clean up after yourself. I decided, squinting at the severed head of a corpse with rolled eyes and covered with splashes of blood. The head of the logistics department is not very tasty. I decided, continuing to finish eating the still fresh remains of the corpse. He stank of alcohol all over. I could feel the smell of alcohol mixed with the metallic tint of the smell of blood in the air, and the taste of meat is given bitterness. Having finished with the corpse, I went to the container, which interested me, and for which I tried to get the keys to the entrance. It was already evening and there were few people, which meant that it was possible to take your time. I inserted the ID card into the hole above the digital panel with bright blue stripes. To the screen, streaked with bright blue lines in a small square, I put my left hand, covered with blood, which at the same time stained the surface. The container doors opened and white steam swirled across the floor. I went into the container and saw tall cylindrical flasks lined up in rows on either side of me. They were cold, and the walls were fogged up from the temperature difference. Look what he's been hiding here. Cryo cameras? I was surprised to see all kinds of alien creatures inside them. So he was a smuggler. I decided right there, watching this picture. My attention was suddenly attracted by another container, but already inside, and I immediately turned my head in his direction. To be more precise, it was a small blue box with many cells containing glass cylinders, but smaller. An amorphous egg? I was surprised to see the remains of glass and the eggshell from the hatched baby on the place of the broken cylinder. Exactly. It looked like the petals of an open bud of dark green color with ribs on the petals. One egg is empty. Having examined the shell closer, I thought. Did I hatch out of it? I immediately had an obvious question. I took an egg by one of the petals of the shell. It looks like a wilted flower bud, quite interesting. So this bastard tried to smuggle me out. I thought, examining the ribbed surface of the shell. Although the starting location is the Amorpha in the game is not this ship. The ceiling in a blue-purple stripe hung like swollen pimples, sprinkled with small yellow speckles of some crystals. From the surface of some of them, green slime drips, some bulges are completely stuck in the column of this slime that connects the floor and ceiling. On the bumpy floor, where residual mini rocks are sometimes visible, there is a coating of the same green slime in which, as if on a soft mattress, the same amorphous eggs are located. Somewhere on the surface there are small pyramids with gilded drawings. And the mysterious ruins. I don't know what happened, but the owner of my body left the container immediately after hatching. The wall of the container is covered with a transparent flowing viscous liquid, similar to saliva. A trail of egg fragments and such goo stretches further from this box, deep into the container. Apparently, he died shortly after due to lack of food. But then I moved into his body. This explains why cockroaches seemed so delicious to me. I let the shell fall to the floor among the rest of its fragments. The body must have moved instinctively, striving to survive. Oh, I'm getting nervous. I knelt before the shell and put the palms of my little paws together, pretending to worship. Mail his memory. And now, you can forget about etiquette. I got up in a moment and looked around, and do what befits an amorphous. I grabbed 2 eggs of my brother's from a small container. And immediately began to eat them greedily. While killing other cubs in the bud. The amorphous one that hatches first devours other eggs. I took one after the other, devouring one by one. Sucking out the internal component and the juices that are still contained in them. It's a pity there was no message about the activation of the predator effect. Well, it's not that important. I thought, licking the remnants of pale yellow goo from the surface of my teeth and mouth. Because there is a lot to eat here. I thought in anticipation and looked at the contents of the smuggler's container. Cryo capsules with all kinds of alien animals, something else was in sealed cardboard boxes. And it's all mine now. Great. I mentally exclaimed as soon as the blue system window appeared in front of me. Race. Unidentified hostile space creature, NVKS, condition. Individual goal. Survive, evolution. Successful 1, feature. Predator's sense, combined, wings, chitin shell, vitality, venom glands, combined, enhanced exoskeleton, acidic blood, psychic organ, strong legs, the ability to imitate sounds. Type? Not defined. Currently, 2 types are characteristic of you. Strong body, 8 out of 10, strong psyche, 2 out of 3, the information on the system screen read. There are only 2 points left to get the strong body type. I decided after studying the information given to me. To be honest, I was disappointed when I finished the Kisaragi. I was thinking as I left the container I had cleaned. Instead of a psychic ability, I got some kind of useless psychic organ. But the head of the logistics department gave me such a generous gift. I jumped from container to container hurrying towards the exit. Strong characteristics that can only be obtained by the middle of the game. Characteristics that will allow me to eliminate crew members more efficiently. When I reached the coveted grate of the ventilation hatch, I immediately climbed into it and began to move forward slowly but surely. Thanks to them, I will be able to act more actively. A meeting with space dogs is also not far off. I was still thinking about the further plans that await me. I don't know how dangerous they are, so I have to get stronger before I meet them. Wait for me. Even if you scream, no one will hear you in the boundless space anyway. The pitiful cries of the crew of this research vessel will be buried in the black abyss. The runway of the research vessel megacorporation. A lot of high elongated hatches through which the boundless space is visible. Planes of new turns of technologies for space. Large cars similar in shape to submarines, but on tracks. Hey Scott. A man with wheat-colored hair disheveled in different directions, a thick beard and mustache of the same color called out. Yeah, I'm almost done. A younger man answered, but with styled hair that was touched with gray. He was twisting something inside the new space technology. Is there much more to do? A man with a towel on his shoulders asked, not taking his attention off the approaching Scott. That's enough, he said in response, we have to tinker with it over time. Ha, fucked up. One of them cursed. I still can't figure it out. Scott said. What exactly? The man with the beard asked. This is a maintenance order. Scott said. Space canteen. High ceilings, which are not possible to reach. Hatches in the walls through which you can see the cosmic night and billions of stars or nearby planets. The tables are wide, but also not too long, with the ends going down to the bottom and attached to the floor of the ship. Each table has rotating seats in a black shade with a light blue stripe on the backs. At each table, bent over their tray, the workers took food. Even if there is a fight, Scott persisted, tapping his spoon on the edge of the food tray, why reassemble the planes? Hey Scott. The man with the beard couldn't stand it. Do you really want to talk about work while eating? A towel is still slung over his shoulders, and a piece of green jelly-like food for astronauts is stuck on his fork. What's wrong with that? The partner was surprised. Fincher, think about it. I've been hearing, Scott continued, dropping the tone of his voice to a quieter one, as if he's plotting that we're getting ready to hunt a metal gremlin. If we meet a metal gremlin, then there won't be a wet spot left of us. His partner exclaimed in response. That's not all. Scott wouldn't let up. They say that this gremlin is already on board. What? Fincher was taken aback when he heard this news. You can smell a strange smell, Scott retorted, hinting at the strange clouds of green haze that hovered in the air every now and then. What is in the air? It's the smell of a metal gremlin. He assured me. On top of everything else, a friend from the catering said that people had started disappearing since last week. Ha, what nonsense. Fincher only snorted in response and continued to devour the food given to him. I've heard something similar, too. Suddenly, a man in round lensed glasses sitting next to Fincher exclaimed. In addition, the head of the logistics department has disappeared somewhere. In this regard, the cargo bay manager was appointed acting head. Their neighbor blurted out the information right there. Really? Fincher was immediately taken aback by what he heard. You see, Fincher. Scott immediately exclaimed, glad that his words were confirmed. I'm right. Good. The man spoke after listening to 2 points of view, or rather the flow of information. Let's say people started disappearing. Then why are the bosses inactive? I heard, their neighbor at the table immediately began, that they were hiding it to avoid unrest. The metal gremlin is to blame for everything. Scott exclaimed immediately. I do not think so. He said as Fincher snapped and immediately got up from the table. What do these losses have to do with the maintenance of fighters? Fincher could not understand in any way and, taking his under his nose, wanted to leave already. I don't know. Said the guy with glasses. I've only heard of disappearances. Scott started. Are they trying to work with discipline in this way? He decided to assume and immediately caught the displeased look of his partner. Even with a hint of threat. Well, maybe you're right. Fincher threw back and walked away from them, and Scott just scratched his head. The runway of the research vessel. The light is extinguished, and only under the sight of one of the fighters it burns and someone's legs stick out. Fincher came closer and saw his partner fixing something there. Scott. He turned to him immediately. I want something to eat, do you want something? No. Without distracting from the case, the partner replied, still continuing to twist the bolts. It's better to bring some synthetic alcohol with you. Scott threw Fincher in the wake. Good. He agreed in response. Damn. Scott swore. Will I be able to finish everything today? The man continued to work in silence, only the barely audible hum of technology broke the silence. Scott, come here for a minute. Suddenly a man heard someone's voice and was immediately distracted. Cameron? He immediately called out to the voice carrier. I'm busy right now. Scott muttered and continued to twist the bolts in the mechanism. It won't be for long. The same voice was heard again from outside. Scott? The newly arrived night voice persisted. That's it. The man wanted to swear mentally, but only clenched his jaw with indignation. If you call for any trifles, beware, there will be no mercy. Mentally, the cattle were angry, taxiing on a small special board from under the fighter. But he was immediately puzzled when he saw only emptiness in front of him, but not the one who was calling him so hard. He's mocking me. He called, but he left. The man was surprised and sat down, looking around. Here. The voice that seemed to mock him rang out again. This time it comes from the doors that are wide open ahead. From the darkness in which nothing is visible. Hurry up. Maintenance room? Scott was surprised. He approached the door and looked inside, guided by the voice that was calling him so persistently. Scott, this way. That voice rang out again. What are you doing there without a light? The man was surprised, looking into the impenetrable darkness. I'm looking for something. The voice answered again. Come on quickly, help me. The voice spoke again, and Scott walked into the darkness of the room without a second thought. He began. How people annoy me. He thought, not straying from the path, making his way with a flashlight. What's that smell? He was surprised when an unbearable stench hit his nostrils, and he immediately covered his nose with his palm. It looks like a rotten fish, but somehow different. Thoughts flashed through his mind. Where are you, you bastard? Scott exclaimed, continuing on his way anyway. Here I am, here. The familiar voice rang out again. Without shining his light on the floor, he did not notice a large bolt and immediately stood on it, which caused him to lose his balance. The bolt rolled out from under his foot, and he fell to the floor with a crash. Hey, he said, rubbing his bruised head. Wait a minute, a thought suddenly dawned on him, somehow all this is suspicious. Even if you turn on the flashlight, it's hard to see anything in such darkness. Squinting at the fallen object, he thought, but without moving from his place. What is Cameron doing in such pitch darkness? In addition, the head of the logistics department has disappeared somewhere. Suddenly Scott remembered the words at lunch. In this regard, the acting head was appointed cargo bay manager. I heard that people have been disappearing since last week. The metal gremlin is to blame for everything. It finally hit Scott as soon as he remembered his words in the dialogue. "'Kay, Cameron?" Already stuttering, my victim asked into the void, crawling on the surface of the floor. "Sko-o-o-ot." I drawled, imitating my voice less assiduously. "Cameron?" Scott asked the question into the void again. Without stretching out the calm before the storm for a long time, I immediately grabbed his head and pulled him to me. "Oh." I pronounced the syllables with aggression and prepared to devour my stupid victim. My eyes were burning with a hungry spark, and steam was escaping from my mouth. Only the crunching of bones and the screams of the victim broke the silence that night. The ability to imitate. It turns out to be very useful. I thought as I ate my delicious food and savored every bite. "Scott." Fincher was calling his colleague. "I brought alcohol," he said, looking around and carrying a bag with something in one hand, in the other a box with bottles of green glass with a burning liquid inside. As he was surprised to notice the left tablet and the tool without attention. Where did he go? The man was puzzled. He is not one of those people, the man thought, looking under the fighter, who abandons what he started halfway. "I'm in the maintenance room." Scott's voice came from somewhere to the side and from a distance. Fincher was surprised. Nevertheless, he went to the maintenance room and looked inside, passing the door that was open to swing open. Why did you go there? He asked a question into the darkness. I had to find something. Scott's voice came out of the darkness again. What are you doing there without a light? The man was puzzled, but he stood at the door and did not move from his place. I need to move something. Help. His partner's voice rang out again from somewhere in the depths. Oh, that's it? Fincher muttered discontentedly and, with a dejected sigh, headed deeper into the room. He walked straight, lighting his way with a flashlight so as not to fall and immediately find a partner. Or even reprimand at all. Hey, what the hell are you doing here? A man with light brown hair snorted, highlighting the way. But in the place where he expected to see his partner, there was only another flashlight lying unattended. Hey. Why here? The sandy-haired man started and pulled his hand towards the unattended flashlight. When suddenly something viscous, warm landed on his back. A feeling as if something was flowing down, dropping drop by drop, stretching from the shoulders down the spine. And the smell. Suddenly, the smell of metal seemed to fill the room. And not the one that usually came from the hardware in this room, they have more of a smell of fuel oil, gasoline, right there it is metallic. What? The man was puzzled and immediately touched himself, where a strange feeling was once present. He removed his hand from the back of his head and looked at the open palm. That's what this metallic smell is in the air. The palm is almost all scarlet. Blood? He asked aloud. He voiced a guess that is as clear as day. What? Stuttering, he shouted, and goosebumps already ran down his back and continued to beat with a small tremor. He was still sitting on the floor, his legs seemed to be shackled by some invisible fear that swept over his head like water that suddenly arrived. He turned the flashlight sharply in the direction where he caught a strange sound. The sound is like liquid dropping drop by drop to the floor. He shone the light in this direction and, alas, not a flattering picture appeared to him. Eyes raised to the top, so that the iris of the eye is barely visible behind the eyelid. Released capillaries on the surface of the protein. Haggard cheeks, as if the victim had been starving for a long time or all the juices had been sucked out of her. Her hair is a little disheveled. From the eye sockets, bloody tears flow down the cheeks and, mixing with the blood on the neck section, it falls to the floor in a viscous stream. I'm here. I've already said it in a broken imitator's voice. I was on the ceiling, holding on with the help of tenacious paws. In one of the long powerful paws, right in front of the next victim, I hold the severed head of the so-called Scott. How wonderful it is to watch the grimace of horror that immediately appeared on his face. I did not wait for something and immediately rushed at the victim who wandered into my trap, ripping open his belly right there. Do I have a talent for fishing? Or should I say hunting? I thought, tearing off pieces of fresh flesh over and over again and savoring them. Imitation. What a cool ability. I thought, continuing my feast. Torn off the top of the body, with intestines and other entrails spilling out on the floor. The head is open like a jar of stew, from which a jelly-like brain is now peeking out. The head is frozen in mute horror, only a trickle of blood flows from the mouth to the floor, forming a scarlet puddle. Among the creatures that the head of the logistics department tried to smuggle out were red worm larvae. Red worms are giant earthworms that live on desert planets. And having the ability to imitate sounds made by other living beings. An alien creature similar to a horse, but not quite. On the head there is something similar to a bone covering a shield, so to speak. On both sides of the head at the mouth there are two medium-thick short tentacles. The animal makes a sound, and something hiding under the embankment repeated it exactly. Rumor has it that these creatures have evolved to hunt other creatures more effectively in harsh realities. A huge creature whose head is divided into several parts, like a flower bud, but on each of its petals, there are rows of small sharp teeth along the edge. He easily swallows his victim whole. It's great that I managed to get hold of the essence of the red worm gene, I thought, feeling a neoplasm in my larynx inside. However, the resulting ability is inferior to the original one. I can only imitate the voice of the last victim. I thought as I put Fincher's head in my mouth. Well, it's a great skill anyway. Tomorrow I'll have to eat someone from the catering. I pondered over the plan of action, devouring my captured victim piece by piece. It seems. Is his name Pierre? I recalled the information I had heard before, which I had specially collected for further actions. I don't think he's close to Fincher, but it's not that important. Tomorrow I'll have dinner with Pierre. I thought, licking the remains from my paws and fantasizing about the taste of my next delicacy. I hope the bubble is doing well. I slowly but surely began to unscrew the loose bolts and slowly unfasten the grill, thereby freeing myself up again into the ventilation hatch. although it is rather strange to refer to it simply as bubble. I mused as I made my way through the ventilation hatch. From now on, I'll call him number 26. Maybe you should look at him before you go to the nest? I moved slowly but surely through the ventilation, trying not to make a lot of noise and not attract too much attention. Hi. Suddenly, I was hit by an electric shock from a voice suddenly appearing in my head that I even stopped and did not continue on my way. Is this really how the psychic organ works? I thought immediately. After all, only recently my thoughts were about number 26, and now I have contacted him telepathically. I didn't think I would be able to communicate with beings who talk through waves. In any case, the tentacles under the head on the back of the head immediately moved. You should say hello. I let out a hiss that meant hello on waves captured only by the bubble. Hi. He answered again. And today I'm hungry. Food. This guy's vocabulary has grown significantly since the last meeting. I reasoned after what I heard. Does psionium have an effect that I don't know about? I let out a hiss that meant sorry. I continued the dialogue, making my way further along the ventilation. I let out a hiss again, which meant it would be difficult to get food today. What is the difficulty? The bubble was perplexed. I let out a hiss, which meant I won't be able to get it, followed by my answer immediately. Whimper. It came from number 26. I understand he's disappointed. I was thinking, making my way further and further along the ventilation hole. But it's dangerous to use this passage now. After the disappearance of the body of the head of the research team, the head of the security department increased the security of the laboratory to the maximum. I was still thinking, moving in the right direction. Now even the ventilation shaft above the laboratory is a threat. Because of this, I haven't been able to bring him a candy bar for several days. I thought and sighed heavily, realizing the whole situation. All I can do is talk to him. I let out a hiss, which meant I'm leaving. I gave my voice again. While. Come again. It was only me who answered. TSK, hang in there. I mentally wished him and headed away from the laboratory. I will be able to help him only after evolution. I began to think, moving away from him. The problem is that it is quite difficult to evolve. The user needs to kill 10 representatives of 2 intelligent races each and get gene essences from them. This is the only way to evolve. There are only humans on this ship, so evolution is impossible. I was thinking, turning again at the fork of the tunnel. There are still pirates, but nothing is known about them yet. Suddenly, with the help of the impulses of my locators, I felt that a person was walking under me, or rather under the ventilation branch in which I was, and talking about something on the phone. I immediately tuned into this droning in order to hear it more clearly. It was none other than the head of the crisis management department. Work? I'll get in touch. I recognized fragments of dialogue. Nearby. S. Oh, yes, this is the head of the crisis management department. I thought immediately. Who is he talking to there? Yes, everything is going according to plan. The man spoke again. Yes, yes. And? Suddenly he tensed, hearing something in the headphones, which are not immediately noticeable to the eye, and stopped. Did the order come from the family? He was surprised at the same time. No. The man stammered and closed his eyes. Who am I to doubt? And sweat broke out on his face. In any case, everything is going well. Mrs. Kisaragi has already been eliminated. He told the information and quickened his pace. The ship will arrive at S08 according to the plan. All orders of Captain Meteor are recorded. I heard it again. What? I tried to keep up with him and followed him. Yes, it's all right. The man said again and put his palm to the small reading screen. The screen lit up with a bunch of twisting bright blue lines. Everything should go according to the will of the family, or to be more precise, G and Eugene. I'll be happy to accept it. He spoke again and headed into an open passage to another room. Understood, before the connection. It turns out that this little man is a sneaky fox. The significance of this conversation began to dawn on me. So the bastard had betrayed the captain. Judging by his conversation, is he up to something? I think I'll have to wait and watch him to see if his actions will benefit me or harm me. Head of the security department. The captain shouted again in raised tones. How the hell do you do your job? Sorry. A blond man in a uniform and gray shades began to mumble in response. How many times have we heard these apologies? The captain of the ship did not let up. The meeting with the pirates is in 2 days. And you still haven't found out anything. We have increased the number of surveillance cameras and security. The head of the security department spoke. To hell with it. The captain immediately shouted back. Head of the navigation department. How many people are missing? The captain asked a question to the man next to him. 8 people, a brown-haired man with thick eyebrows answered after a moment. Including the former head of the logistics department. The head of the research group is dead. The captain of the ship continued to be indignant. 7 more people were missing. Why haven't you found the culprit yet? Are you in cahoots with him? No way. Stuttering came the reply. I was sitting at this time in the ventilation hatch and enjoying watching what was happening. I'm sorry, I thought, putting my short paws to my mouth, but the criminal is next to you. Damn. The captain of the ship swore. He gritted his teeth in displeasure, but did not raise his voice. I think the head of the security department is not lying. The head of the crisis management department spoke. What did you say? The captain immediately asked, turning to the brunette with the scar. I also checked everything. The head of the security department did everything he could. The head of the crisis management department immediately answered. The criminal has not been caught, the captain said aggressively through his teeth, and you are also protecting him. The captain was surrounded by an unkind aura, which, in principle, was to be expected in connection with what had happened. I want to say. The head of the crisis management department spoke again. By human standards, the dark-haired man with the scar said, no one is able to hide such a thing. The metal gremlin is just a rumor, he continued to express his point of view, perhaps we were attacked by someone we don't know about. I was surprised, still watching what was happening. Why has the atmosphere become so strange? Listen, said the head of the navigation team, the head of the crisis management department. The AI installed on the ship used to be on the battleship. If there was any living creature on board, it would have been discovered long ago. The brown-haired man told his guess. I served in the army, I know how AI works. The brunette replied, crossing his arms over his chest. However, everyone knows about the container, which the head of the logistics department was able to carry out. All the cryo chambers were empty. An empty container is just a cryocamera without anything and a pile of torn boxes. Where did those who were in them go? The head of the crisis management department asked, providing new information. That's it? I cursed mentally. What I was most afraid of happened. According to the present head of the security department and the head of the technical team, it became clear that the news for them was not particularly joyful and now sounded publicly. Well, the captain spoke most calmly, which is quite surprising. Suppose a space monster is running around the ship. The question is, where is he wandering, since no one has seen him? There is a place, the dark-haired man with the scar immediately exclaimed, which we have not yet examined. He pointed somewhere up there. Ventilation? A whisper swept through the office when everyone immediately looked for the pointer. Ventilation shafts are located throughout the ship. The head of the crisis management department spoke without lowering his hand. In addition, they are about a meter high, which is enough for comfortable movement. Meter? There were immediately questions from the side. It's not enough to kill someone, isn't it? The metal gremlin is 80 centimeters tall, the dark-haired man with the scar explained, but it can destroy an entire battleship. Is this guy's name Arnold? I immediately began to recall, not very happy with the news I had heard. I should have taken the risk and eliminated him while I had the chance. If that's the case, they immediately started questioning the brunette based on the information they heard, as you say, then are we in a complete ass? If this thing ate the body of the head of the research team, we're finished. Just take it live and hand it over to Noble Capital. The head of the crisis management department calmly replied. If it can be established that it was he who ate Kisaragi Eugene, then they will believe it. And what to do with pirates? The head of the technical team immediately asked. If there is no body, then we will have to fight him. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke. To win the war, you need to control the situation from the inside. And in order to protect people, it is necessary to deal with the monster. At this time, the captain sat and listened attentively to the conversation of his subordinates, thinking about something. How many soldiers do you need? The ship's captain finally voiced his question. I'll take 6 people out of 8 squads. The dark-haired man with the scar calmly replied. All right, I'll let you. The captain spoke. I hope the inspection of the ventilation shafts will bear fruit. Thank you. The head of the crisis management department answered only briefly. At that time, I was already trying to retreat from this place in order to think about the course of further actions faster. Judging by Arnold's identity, he will put a guard on the ventilation. I thought, twisting the bolts. But the ventilation compartments are actually sealed. Even if you reach the end, there is nowhere to go. I was still thinking the same way, fixing the grid on the opposite side of the shaft. There is a surveillance camera in the corridor, and the ventilation passage is blocked. If I leave the nest, I'll have nowhere to go. I deftly bounced down the pipes and went down. The corridors are crammed with CCTV cameras, and the ventilation shafts are unusable. It's time to make a choice. I landed on the already solidified green slime that lined the nest and headed into its depths. Run away? Or resist? He was puzzled and lay down, folding his smaller paws under his head. My upper body sank deeper into the muck, or rather into the cocoon formed with reddish growths on the walls. Closing my eyes, I again remembered the words of this man, which began to flash in my brain like pictures, and his voice was on hearing. By human standards, no one is able to hide such a thing. I remembered again how he pointed to the place where I was hiding, as if he could see right through. Ventilation shafts are located throughout the ship. In addition, they are about a meter high, which is enough for comfortable movement. His amber eyes gazing upward. A look that seems to look into the soul. Just take it, live, and hand it over to noble capital. If it can be established that it was he who ate Kisaragi Eugene, then they will believe it. Anger shot through me. I clenched my teeth hard with indignation, and my eyes lit up with an unkind scarlet light. Take it alive? Amorpha. I was indignant, getting more and more angry at the course of their thoughts. The train of thought of these stupid mortals. It seems that they perceive me as some kind of wild animal from the most ordinary planet. A hostile space creature can bite the neck of its enemy, I argued indignantly, emitting steam from its mouth, even if its limbs are cut off and only one head remains. Such is the amorphous. I will fight. I opened my mouth and let out a cry of indignation, baring my sharp teeth. I'll show you how reckless and stupid the idea of taking an amorpha alive is. Especially with a small number of soldiers. I raised my paws up, assuming the stance of a monster ready for anything. Show these mortals your superiority. And in the ventilation shaft. I use all possible means. And I'll show you what hell looks like in space. I rested my paws on the floor and let out a kind of signal. Similar to what I used to emit with my mustache, I have done the same at the moment. It's not for nothing that I built a nest in this junction of pipes that run around the entire perimeter of the ship. Connection. Many bands of energy dispersed from me in different directions immediately. They followed like bright red-black arrows, but visible only to my eye and no one else. The ship's personnel began to explore the ship, starting with the search of compartments and ending with tracking the location and movement of enemies. It was as if I saw with my own eyes directly. Two figures of men follow along the corridor. A woman from the laboratory is heading towards them. If we assume that a ship floating in space is a living being, then I am no different from a parasite in the brain. My red and black communication arrows envelop the entire ship. I know everything and I don't have a gap in this snare. I don't have blind spots. After all, I know what's going on the ship, as well as its owners. The captain and department heads gather on the bridge. A spacious room with a lot of equipment. 3 people walk around the perimeter, studying something through a tablet in their hands. 2 in the corners of the room drive some information into computers. Since Arnold is also here, he must be taking command. Armed soldiers also started moving. A group of 3 men in snow-white protective clothing are heading through the tunnel. Most likely, these are those who were ordered to study the ventilation shafts. As expected, the group split up. We have decided on the main points of the plan. I was thinking, still studying the movement of people on the ship. I will deal with everything else along the way, depending on the movement of the enemy and his weapons. I closed my jaws and lowered my head. Well, now we can go meet the guests. A1 is in position. It was heard in the speaker. Team A starts the operation. The screen reflects the windows from the surveillance cameras, as well as in one of the windows, a plan of ventilation shafts with tracking of the fighters sent there. This is the operations room. The brunette with the gathered hair on the back of his head spoke. He tracks the movement of the fighters in the mine, as well as whether any danger is approaching by the cameras, in order to immediately warn them in time. B1. In position. The B1 command starts the operation. B1. The connection is bad. Study everything carefully. From the computer screen, the same picture is displayed on a huge screen, which is also watched by the ship's captain and the head of the security department among the standing people. This. B1. Accepted. If you see anything suspicious in the distance, report immediately. Most likely, the dark-haired man with a scar thought, also watching what was happening. Lady Kisaragi was killed by a monster. Initially, I had to deal with its elimination. The plan remains unchanged, but the number of variables should be reduced as much as possible. The head of the crisis management department decided and immediately frowned. We can't let anything happen before Mr. Eugene arrives. The monster. You will die before today is over. The dark-haired man with the scar was thinking, not taking his eyes off the screen. A1, there is a fork ahead, head to the right. They spoke the hint into the microphone again. B1, you also have a fork ahead, move to the right. V3. The connection is not very good. The guy with his hair in a ponytail spoke again. Check it out and move on. Accepted. We will contact you as soon as we finish all the work. The route is difficult, the head of the crisis management department said aloud. Let them move cautiously. This is the operations room. The guy immediately started talking into the equipment. Take your time, search carefully. The dark-haired man with a scar grunted, something strained him in what he saw. In V3, the camera shows the same thing. Let him check it out. Immediately, he instructed the dispatcher to hand over to the armed personnel. I'm listening. A short reply immediately followed. Q3, check the camera. The boy immediately passed the instructions into the microphone. But there was only silence in response. This is the operations room. V3, I repeat. Check the camera. It's all right. It came from the other end, but the visibility of the camera was quite murky. B2, unite with B3. The guy with the ponytail on the back of his head immediately gave instructions behind you and continue moving. B2, accepted. Immediately there was an answer on the other end. B1 remained standing in place. B2 went straight to B3, while B3 was supposedly on the move. B2 was approaching B3 at an accelerated rate. Sensors showed that B3 and B2 collided with each other, which is what the commanders wanted. But before they could give instructions or listen to the report, a heart-rending human scream filled the room, plunging the captain, the head of the medical team and the head of the crisis management department into horror. The heart-rending scream continued, so loudly, so sharply and for a long time, already breaking into a wheeze. B2. The boy at the control panel immediately exclaimed. What happened? It's here. There was an immediate response. It only again managed to be heard the same way. But it was interrupted again by a terrifying scream. Arnold listened to this in silence, but only gritted his teeth with indignation at what was happening. V3, the connection with B2 is lost. The boy exclaimed into the microphone again. Report the situation. It dragged B2 away. There was a response, and the camera screens rippled from the loss of signal. There is nothing on the screen, please provide details. Due to the sudden attack, it is impossible to check the area. There was a response to the request. The head of the technical team and the head of the security department stood arriving in horror and only gasped for air, like fish thrown on dry land. Hey, signalman. They exclaimed immediately, moving away a little from the shock. What's going on there? Well. The guy with the ponytail stuttered and jumped on the spot from suddenness. Why are you did he manage everything so quickly? A soldier in reinforced equipment could not answer, thoughts swarmed in the head of a brunette with a scar, driving him more and more into horror as he was attacked. Even for experienced killers, it's not easy to cope with this. He clenched his fists until they crunched, not stopping to think about what had happened. What had happened filled his head. I thought it was a wild animal, but how wrong I was. It's more agile than I thought. Signalman, tell everyone. The head of the crisis management department immediately exclaimed. To open fire in case of the slightest movement. Let B1 unite with B3, find B2 and report on the situation. Yes, the head of the department. The signalman immediately responded. This is the operations room. V3, the signalman said again, temporarily stop looking for B2 and unite with B1. Accepted. There was an immediate response. B1 has teamed up with V3 and we are starting to search for B2. The soldiers reported again. Accepted, B1. The signalman immediately replied. The brunette with the scar immediately began to think what could happen at such a pace and what it would be better to do as soon as possible because not only others on the ship, he could also become a potential victim. If this continues, everyone will die. B1 was standing still while B3 was speeding towards him. It's B1, I hear something. A voice rang out. This is the operational room, the signalman immediately responded. What kind of sound do you hear? I'm not sure, but something is definitely coming. There was a reply, and his camera was displayed on the screen. Everyone immediately tensed up and did not take their eyes off the screen. It is not possible to set a goal because of the fork. The answer started from the other end, but suddenly the voice stopped. B1 corrects. The voice came again from the other end. Sound source B3. The dark-haired man with the scar immediately sighed contentedly. I hear the voice of V3. They said it again from the other end of the wire. Ugh. The signalman sighed with relief. This is the operations room. B1, report back when you merge with V3. But there was only silence in response. B1? The signalman spoke again. Only one of the walls of the ventilation shaft was visible on the screen. V3 was dragged away by the enemy. The silence was broken again by a voice from the other end of the connection. What? The head of the crisis management department immediately exclaimed. And those present in the room were again seized with horror. Step. Another step. One more. This is the head of the department. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke, snatching the headphones and microphone from the signalman. Report the situation. It all happened so fast. There was an answer. That I couldn't see anything. Fuck. Arnold swore, outraged by what was happening. He pressed the headphones harder to his ears, and wreaths of anger appeared on his forehead. He's right under your nose, and you don't see him? He exclaimed angrily immediately in response. Sorry. It sounded on the other end. The signalman and the head of the medical team turned in his direction. Damn. The head of the crisis management department swore and threw the headphones on the table. No, it can't be. He shouted in his mind, breathing fast, as if without the opportunity to breathe deeply. Maybe it was always there, and we didn't notice? It slowly reached the man. At the same time, it did not get on cameras B1 and B3. The dark-haired man with the scar was thinking, and his face was covered with perspiration. It's impossible for a monster to intentionally avoid shooting. He didn't say anything out loud, but the signalman was afraid to touch him or say something. No, wait a minute. Suddenly, the head of the crisis management department came to light. He took the headphones from the table quite calmly. I put them on my head, setting up a stray wave. This is the head of the department. He spoke, holding the earpiece with a microphone. B1, please state your full name. He spoke quite calmly. What? There was an answer from the other end of the wire. I repeat. The dark-haired man with the scar spoke calmly again, which made the captain who was standing next to him tense up at that time. He didn't understand what was going on and what Arnold was chazzing. B1, identify yourself now. Oops. There was almost not the same voice that once before. He distorted a little, thereby shocking Arnold. Gotcha? His guess was correct. One of the screens was covered with cobwebs from the fact that the eye of video surveillance was broken. And on top of the broken lens lay a four-fingered paw of a purple hue. Oh. The head of the security department and the head of the medical team stood with their mouths open and could not say anything out of horror. They almost became afraid to breathe. The screen immediately hissed and became covered with small ripples from the lack of a signal. This also scared the head of the technical team, which caused him to fall to the floor. This is A1. It sounded in the headphones. But the head of the crisis management department arrived in severe shock, covered with perspiration and afraid to say anything. It was as if he had swallowed his tongue from the shock he had experienced. What the hell is going on? One of the soldiers exclaimed again. This is A1, please answer. The voice rang out again. The brunette with the scar did not waste time for a long time, clenched his teeth with anger. The B team is finished, I thought, destroying one of the surveillance cameras. I got a tip from number 26 and disabled the means of communication with the help of waves. I reasoned while in the ventilation shaft, smeared in the blood of my victims. In front of me there are 3 bodies in a pile with their heads cut off or rather torn off. Because of these waves, V3, who was walking behind, heard interference. He sat down and, taking off his protective helmet, immediately began to examine it for the cause of the breakdown. I eliminated the soldier who was repairing the equipment, my sting immediately stabbed into his neck, and green stripes swelled under the skin, spreading across his face. With the help of the new combined skill poison glands. After that, everything went like clockwork. Thanks to them, I ate heartily. Continuing to recall the course of my actions, I devoured one by one the heads of my fallen victims. Next in line is the A-team, I thought, and immediately grinned, anticipating what was coming. Look where they are. I sent the pulse waves again in order to track my victim and think over the course of action. Waves of turquoise hue immediately filled the ventilation shafts, as if probing everything in search of the object I was looking for. Found. I immediately exclaimed mentally, seeing a group of soldiers walking in the palm of my hand. In full combat readiness. And no wonder. I thought and immediately ducked into a branch of the mine. Team B didn't know anything about me. However, now the enemy knows that I can imitate a human voice. I slowly but surely made my way through the mine, following my objects of observation. Is it possible to turn the current situation in my direction? I made my way to the area I needed and immediately took up a position, looking around the corner to see if my potential victims appeared on the horizon. There is a fork on the way from where the A-team will appear. They'll be here soon. I was thinking, hiding. They say knowledge is power, is it really so? I thought and grinned, watching the terrain from around the corner. Incomplete knowledge can be poison,